Agenda is approved. All right, for this meeting, we continue to utilize the Zoom platform.
Recess.
If a council member has a question, please use the raise your hand feature. I will do my best to recognize you in the order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you may then ask your question. Please limit yourself to one question and to one clarifying question if necessary. Jesse Bond.
Council member was unable to connect problem, and we've had a YouTube problem. I think we're back up and running now, so I will move to my city manager report. Thank you again, everyone, for your patience. All right, a few adjustments on my end. Again, good evening. My name is Jesse Bond. I am the city manager for the city of Mercer Island. And I apologize, there we go. The City of Mercer Island, along with the Mercer Island Youth and Family Services Foundation and the Mercer Island community, it is remembering a wonderful contributor to the MIYFS Foundation, Krishnaswamy. Mai passed away recently. She began serving on the MIYFS Foundation board in 2018 and volunteered on the breakfast committee. In fact, that was the first time I met her, just last year, I believe. She also served as the co-chair of the Strategic Marketing Committee and eventually as the vice president of the board. From the Mercer Island Youth and Family Services Foundation Board of Directors, they said Mai was a visionary who strove to analyze every detail of our organization and succeeded in improving the processes by which we would clearly and broadly communicate the value of MIYFS essential services to our community. Her leadership and compassion will be remembered and certainly honored in the work that we're doing now and will continue to do. Moving on, council. Let me just make a quick adjustment. COVID-19 update. Mercer Island has 197 confirmed cases. That was as of yesterday. We are up 183 cases since the last time I reported. Oh, excuse me. Let's start that over. We are up from 183 cases when I last reported to you on October 6th. If you have any questions on COVID-19, community members, if you need resources, I just want to remind you that the city's call center is available at the number shown there, 275-7626. And as a reminder, we post all of our COVID-19 information on our Let's Talk page. Also, I've mentioned a couple times, we continue to receive inquiries from the community about Halloween restrictions related to the pandemic. As a reminder, this is not something the city directly regulates, but we're happy to pass along information from King County Public Health. It is a holiday where we can participate, particularly because we're outside in some cases and wearing masks. Just a reminder to limit contact with other people, minimize your touching points, and certainly practice good hand hygiene if you're trick-or-treating. Also a reminder that many households may not be participating in traditional Halloween activities this year. From Public Health, they shared some creative ideas which we've posted on our Let's Talk page. Consider neighborhood socially distanced costume parade, decorating your yard or neighborhood. I know my kids are certainly enjoying all of the yard decorations in our neighborhood. Halloween scavenger hunt with the kids outdoors or in your yard, a virtual costume party, exchanging candy and treats with families you know, trick-or-treating inside your home is another option, or doing something special with a family like a craft party or a Halloween celebration. Again, just a reminder, the city does not regulate particular activities related to Halloween, but we will continue to share ideas with you. Moving on to a different topic, update on council and board and commission meetings. First of all, Just a reminder that we are proceeding with virtual meetings. The Open Public Meetings Act statutory waivers are in effect through November 9th. For our safety and community safety, we are planning to continue our virtual meetings for the foreseeable future. For the City Council, a reminder, we have a joint meeting with the Mercer Island School District this Thursday. The meeting begins at 5 o'clock, and we think the joint meeting portion will last for about 45 minutes. And then I understand the school board will have their own meeting following that. After that, our next City Council meeting is Monday, November 2nd. Again, we changed the date from November 3rd because that's election night. And then we'll have another council meeting on November 17th. Last week, we had a very busy board and commission meeting week. So if you're interested in viewing the videos from those meetings, Utility Board, Arts Council, and the Open Space Conservancy Trust, those are all now posted to our website. The Parks and Recreation Commission, they are, I think, the last board and commission to resume meeting. They have not met since February. So I know they're all very excited to resume meetings. They will hold a meeting on Thursday, November 5th. The agenda, along with the staff reports, will be out a week prior. And I'm told the meeting topics include the Aubrey Davis Park Trail improvements. City Council, you might recall that we had discussed scoping of potential trail improvement projects during the Aubrey Davis master plan. The Parks Commission will begin to contemplate the trail work and bring that back to you, bring that recommendation back to you, excuse me. They will also be resuming work on the Luther Burbank dock reconfiguration. You may recall that we just concluded an open house process. So the Parks Commission will be taking all that information and using that to inform what we call the preferred alternative or design option, which will also come back to you for consideration. A reminder that this process will have additional public input as we proceed. And then I believe they'll also be providing an update to the Parks Commission on all the changes that have impacted the Parks and Recreation Department over the past year. Council, and I apologize, I'm jumping all over a bit tonight. Later this evening, we will be talking about the 2021 biennial budget. This evening, we have a public hearing. And just so that anybody that's watching at home is aware, we will have the public hearing for the budget. We have a couple other agenda items, and then we will continue the budget discussion at the end of the meeting. We do that just so that those of you that are here for the public hearing can make your comments, and then you don't have to stay for the whole meeting if you're not interested in doing so. I've already gone through November 2nd. We'll be back talking to you about the budget proposals. We'll also have the third quarter financial status report that evening. November 17th is our second public hearing. This is also where you approve your rates for the year ahead and set your property tax ordinance. And then we're anticipating budget adoption on December 1st. Everything that on the budget is on our website in case anyone is interested. Okay, moving on to a wide range of city service updates, and I'll try to pick up the pace since I know we got a late start of the meeting tonight. Monday, we did have a house fire here on Mercer Island. Fire department crews were dispatched to the 2400 block of 70th Avenue Southeast. Initially, reports of smoke, as you can see in the photo there. The response was eventually upgraded to a structure fire. We did have assistance from Bellevue and Eastside Fire and Rescue. Thank you to both of them. Police was out, also assisted with some traffic control, and PSE helped with cutting off the utilities to the structure. There was significant damage to the structure, but I am happy to report that the house was unoccupied at the time and no firefighter injuries occurred in the response. So nice job to our team. Thank you to the citizens that reported the smoke, and the cause of the fire is still under investigation. All right, as I mentioned, I was going to be covering a whole range of things today. At the October 6th council meeting, just a reminder, the City Council extended the deadline for the 2021 Comprehensive Plan and Development Code amendments. The new deadline is November 2nd, which is just right around the corner. which allows our community some additional time to submit proposed amendments to either the comp plan or the development code. The process is open to the public. We did get some feedback today from a community member that was concerned that it looked like it was open to developers only. That's not the case. This is open to everyone. For information on this process or to submit a proposed amendment, you can contact Robin Probsting in our Community Planning and Development Office, and her information is there. And certainly, we do publish a weekly, I think we're back to weekly publication again, permit information bulletin. Updates you on planning and permitting deadlines, and if you're interested in that document, we have the link on the screen there. Thrift shop update. Speaking of Halloween, I've been asked to promo the thrift shop. We are open again on Sundays only. We do have lots of fun stuff if you're still looking for Halloween costume ideas or decorations. So please stop by on Sunday. I drove by actually this last Sunday and the line was around the door. So if you were waiting in that line, thank you for your patience. We are limited right now due to the pandemic as to the number of people that we can accommodate inside the thrift shop. So thank you for shopping and supporting the thrift shop and the Youth and Family Services Department. All right, in terms of donations, we hear there's a pent-up demand, and we are excited to announce that we will be reopening for donations a little differently than what we've done in the past. We will start taking donations on Saturday, October 31st, and planning to run most Saturdays through the end of the year, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the community center. So you'll drive up to the front of the building, drop your items in a bin, and yes, certainly during the next week, or at least October 31st, we will maintain access to the ballot drop box, which is also located in the parking lot. All right, here's the things you need to know about donating. We are not able to assist in unloading your car. So when you come, please be prepared to unload your own items. We will not be doing sorting at that time. After you place your items in your specific bins, staff and volunteers will be sanitizing the donations, and then we'll be holding them for a series of days before they are sorted. We're still working on some of the details behind the scenes, but know that your safety and our safety is of utmost importance, and we'll be communicating additional information on the donation processing as we go forward. We are, and that should say donation bins, that last bullet, staff are looking at putting donation bins around the island just to help you rid your house of all those wonderful things that we can sell in a thrift shop. So we're still looking at that as an option, and we will let you know if that comes to fruition. So what you'll start seeing, council and community, is some promotions in the coming weeks about the items that we would like and the items that we can't take at this time. So things that are great for us to process and sell: art, baby equipment, things like books, DVDs, CDs, clothing, certainly collectibles, electronics, with a caveat, they need to be working, otherwise we have to process them and recycle them. Things like home decor, housewares, certainly jewelry is one of our big sale items. Linens, again, in good condition. Anything like sporting goods, tools, toys, and pet supplies in good condition. What we cannot accept right now, and again, we'll be pushing out a pretty big marketing campaign on this. Appliances, we don't take those anyway, but they're just too big. Barbecues, things that really should be recycled, like batteries and light bulbs. We cannot, unfortunately, take bikes right now, or any building materials and cabinets. Car seats, and I still have kids in car seats, so they expire after 5 years, so please check the expiration date. We cannot accept expired car seats. Chemicals and paint. Christmas trees. We cannot take Christmas trees. Exercise equipment, like stationary exercise equipment. Remember, we can take sports gear, but we can't take the big bulky pieces of equipment. We're not accepting food donations right now for the food pantry. Remember, we're accepting gift cards only. No furniture. Under our pre-COVID conditions, we did accept some limited furniture donations. We cannot take furniture right now. No gardening tools, no lamps, halogen lamps or lava lamps, no mowers or other types of equipment. liquids, paint, no recalled items. And this was the item that the staff really wanted me to emphasize. Previously, we'd often have large trucks show up with wanting to donate everything in the truck, and much of the drop-off was unsaleable items. We will have to be selective. So if we don't have the ability to process large trucks right now with unsaleable items. So to the community, we hope this is a great opportunity to offload some of those items you've been saving for us through the pandemic, and we certainly need your help. If items are not in usable condition, it means we actually have to process them and likely throw them away, so you can save us that step and do it yourself. So stay tuned for more marketing information on the thrift shop donation process, and we're excited to get back to work, City Council. Speaking of, we still are looking for volunteers to help us, both on the donation side and the thrift shop side. We know that as we start ramping up donations again, we'll likely be gradually increasing thrift shop hours as well. So we have lots of things you can do as a volunteer: donation management, cashier, sales floor, apparel. We happen to have Halloween theme right now, and other things like marketing and administrative assistance. We can accommodate a variety of schedules. So please reach out to Suzanne Fallon at mercerisland.gov, and we'd be happy to get you connected to a volunteer shift. All right, another upcoming event, our Medicine Takeback Event is October 24th from 10 to 2 p.m. here at City Hall. This is a drive-through event, different than the prior year. We have everything listed on our website in terms of what we will take, including prescribed narcotics, prescription or other over-the-counter medications, pet medications, EpiPens that are not opened, and vaping devices, although you have to remove the battery. So again, that's Saturday, October 24th, this Saturday from 10 to 2 here at City Hall. Luther Burbank Docks Open House. This is somewhat related to the Parks and Recreation Commission slide I just shared a moment ago. Follow up on the open house that ran for about 5 weeks. We had 131 participants, and 80% were from Mercer Island. We've posted the results on Let's Talk. And again, this information that we collected will be handed off now to the Parks and Recreation Commission and will be used to inform next steps, and council ultimately a recommendation to you on a future project scope. So that should say the meeting is scheduled for November 5th, the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, not tentatively. Okay, again, I'm kind of all over the board tonight with themes, but we had a recycling event this last Saturday, and it was a booming success. I think it's because everyone had all their items stored up from the pandemic. So we had over 1,200 cars at this event, and I have to tell you, for just one event, in 2019, with 2 events, we had 940 cars. So we doubled our attendance for just one event this year. I'll remind you that our spring event was canceled due to the pandemic. Over 100,000 pounds of material was recycled, again, more than double what was collected last year. And I do want to just give a shout out. I know some of you were in line for a long time. I know we had some traffic problems in the area. We apologize for that. We were a victim of, I think, a little bit of our own success here. So we will take that all into account as we plan for our next event. For those of you that were in line and got cut off at the end because we couldn't process a donation, I'll just remind you that appliances, things like furniture and motor oil can be collected curbside by Recology. The number is there. You do have to call ahead to make an appointment. And the same day, we had a very successful donation event. So the Youth and Family Services Foundation, many thanks to their ongoing partnership. They were out at the fall recycling event serving as our greeters. They were accepting donations, cash, checks, and gift cards to support the Youth and Family Services Department. And this operated very differently from years past. They raised over $11,000 at this event. And I understand we're still counting. Donations are still coming in. So thank you very much. I will tell you, just last week, I heard from the YFS staff that they thought we needed about $20,000 more to get through the end of the year in terms of emergency assistance and also food pantry support. So this is great. This is getting us partway to our year-end goal. Also on this weekend, we had a really busy weekend, Arbor Day. We celebrated Arbor Day on Saturday. My thanks to Deputy Mayor Weicker for going out. This was a COVID-19 pandemic event. We were not able to have community participation this year, but she joined one of our staff and they were live on a video. Thank you so much. Also, we had a number of features on social media this past week regarding information on trees and what you can do at your home. So I encourage you to go revisit those posts, and we'll also be sure to share that information again. Mask giveaways, big shout out, Council. I think we've been featuring this every week for a while. Our emergency management volunteers handed out over 800 masks at the October 15th mask giveaway. Thank you very much. King County has passed along to us over 16,000 masks that we've been able to hand out to the community, thanks to our fine group of volunteers. Also a shout out to the police and fire department. I know when they're not out on calls, they stop by the mask events and give our volunteers support. And my thanks to Ryan Daly there. He's been championing all the volunteer efforts associated with the pandemic, and he extends his appreciation to the great volunteer team. All right, this was just a good news story I wanted to share. We had a couple citizens dealing with a water box that was flooding, and it was we were growing a lake in the middle of the city here. So thanks to some creative efforts on the part of the city, we got the fire department out, and they were able to assist in pumping the water away from the structure while we waited to get this repaired. Again, just a shout out to the community and the staff team and the fire department for creativity and solving a problem before the flooding actually reached the homes. And I understand it was quite close to doing so. Great work, everybody. Okay. Council, you know, as part of the budget, I've been beating the drum around succession planning and redundancy in our staff training, and certainly in growth. So I want to give a shout out to Casey Leidy, who successfully passed the Waterworks Operation 3 certification test. The city is required to have at least one person with the Waterworks Operation certification in charge of our city's water system. Casey's certification brings the number of certified operators for the city of Mercer Island to 3. This is really fantastic news. I know how hard Casey worked on this, so congratulations to him, and thanks to our Public Works team for continuing to work on these important cross-training opportunities and certifications. Okay, other updates real quick here. Just a reminder, I can't believe it, we are headed into winter. We've already had a wind event, and I'm hoping, knock on wood, we don't have a snow event for a while. Council, we keep all of our inclement weather information on the Let's Talk page, and I just wanted to remind the community that it is there. When we have inclement weather, that's where we post our regular updates. So we're already in winter storm preparation mode. Upcoming elections, just a reminder, the ballot drop box is at the community center. I know some people have reached out and said, why isn't this a drive-through box? And I'll just tell you, it's a long story. It has to do with how the parking lot flows and safety and transportation engineering. So for right now, when you drive in, you do have to pop out of your car to drop your ballot in the box. I'm told that our box has filled almost daily. King County Elections is aware of that and is out emptying the box. So this is just a friendly reminder. If the box is full and you can't securely get your ballot in, hang on to it, and someone will be there shortly to empty the box. A reminder, if you haven't registered to vote yet, you have until October 26th, and November 3rd is Election Day. If you need more information on voting, there's a website there at the bottom of the screen. Fire department wanted me to pass along a reminder to everybody. Fireplace safety, this is a really good time to check your flues to assure there is no blockage in your chimneys. And we know from recent experience that this can cause smoke to back up, and certainly creates a safety hazard in your home. And it's coming up on daylight savings ending November 1st. So a reminder to check your batteries and your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Fun fact, we have one of the many things we do here at the city to protect the security of our networks and systems is phishing. We do phishing tests on our staff, and we've recently extended that exercise to the city council and board and commissions. So they've received some really curious emails, and everyone's doing a good job not opening them. So from our technology team, they just wanted to remind you, all community members and certainly users of the city's network, to be safe online. There's some great information at the link below if you'd like more information. All right, and finally, let's end on a festive note here. When I was last here, I reported to you that we were looking to raise funds to light the Mercerdale Park tree. And we were unfortunately not able to raise those funds in time. However, we're not giving up. We have a new plan. We are proposing to light the trees in the median on 78th from basically the Sculpture Park to Mercerdale Park. And for those of you that lived here for a long time, you know there have been years where the median was lit. It's a little bit less expensive for us to light those trees, believe it or not, and we can also use volunteers to do so. So heads up to the council and the community, the weekend of November 14th and 15th, we'll be closing 78th to install lights on the trees. We are looking for volunteers to help with this work. And while we're at it, the median, I just combined two words there. The median needs to desperately be weeded. So we're hoping that we can use our volunteers and staff to get that done while the road is closed. And I will mention, we still need sponsors for this because we have to purchase the lights, and there may be just a little bit of staff overtime to ensure safety protocols are in place. So we're reaching out to groups regarding the sponsorship. If you'd like to participate, please feel free to reach out to Ryan Daly, or you can also contact me directly. We're really excited about this. The town center businesses are excited. We are going to find a way to make this happen and bring some festivity to our town center during what has been a really, really challenging year. So more information coming, and as I already said, council, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. That is my very long report. Thank you all.
Wow, well done. Thank you very much. All right, so moving on to appearances. Tonight's agenda will not include in-person public appearances in accordance with Proclamation 20-28.11 and the Governor's extended Safe Start Order. However, individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing application, provided, however, they registered their desire to speak with the City Clerk's office by 4 p.m. today. Our City Clerk will call on you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak to the City Council on any item. All remarks will be addressed to the council as a whole and not to individual council members or staff members. If any person makes personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the council, I may request that the person leave the meeting. When it is your turn to address the council, be sure to speak audibly and state your name for the record. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. I will provide you with 30-second and 15-second warning when your time is about to expire. City Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have three people signed up to speak tonight. The first individual is Ms. Addie Smith. Addie, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hello?
we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. As I stated in my July 21st public comment, I am a hate crime survivor. King County Public Health Director has declared has declared racism in King County a public health crisis. The police, city manager, city attorney, prosecutor, and city council lack accountability and responsibility. According to records from the clerk's office, the last police implicit bias training was in 2015. Today is October 20th, 2020. Earlier this year, Chief Ed Holmes stated that he last met with an African-American family in 2011. My teenage daughter and I have been threatened, harassed, stalked, and attacked since June of 2019. In July of this year, 2020, this board approved an $87,000 request from Chief Ed Holmes for automated license plate readers, which is a waste of money. The city doesn't have body cams for the police. Also, the cameras in City Hall and the police department allegedly only last 30 days. I don't believe this for 1 second. The city needs cameras to record continually. This would have helped prove my going to the police department month after month asking for help to stop the racists here on Mercer Island who were attacking my daughter and I. Investing in cameras that continually record would be better for the city. There is a race problem here. Trying to continue to keep it a secret won't work. When my car was stolen without any proof, the police said it was because I was behind on my payment, which does not make violating Washington state laws invalid and unenforceable. If my car was legally repossessed, which it wasn't, why weren't the items in my vehicle returned? And why did the thief manipulate my garage to enter and steal my vehicle, which is against Washington state law? Why did he use his vehicle and not a repossession vehicle? So many more questions. The police always seem to side with the white people here who break the law. As well, for court appearances other than trial during this pandemic, where King County COVID numbers increased by over 4,800 cases since last week, the city should be investing in video hearings. The city is further damaging my name and credibility. The city is further damaging my name and credibility and employability by having the charges against me show up on my background check. I have a career, and since you've allowed my car to be stolen because your deputy mayor is recorded saying I was behind in payment, surely I should be allowed to take care of my family until a trial can be held. Finally, Blakely Warmington colleagues referred to her as a Nazi. Why is she allowed to prosecute cases? She continues to earn over $7,000 monthly from Mercer Island. Also, Judge Wayne Stewart is a racist. Why is he continually appointed by all of you as the judge? And why does your public defender earn a minimum of $50 per case when the prosecutor earns $7,000 a month?
Addie, I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you for your comments. Deb, who's next for public appearances?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next person on the list is Meg Lippert.
Next, Deb.
Meg, I can hear you. We don't see you on video yet.
Oh, okay, here we go.
There you go.
Sorry, just got to remote. Okay. Whew. Meg Lippert, Mercer Island. As you know, in the past decade, various council members have tried to justify building a variety of projects in Mercerdale Park, City Hall, the fire station, and others. Unfortunately, there seems to be no institutional memory that citizens value their parkland as one of the primary contributors to the high quality of life on Mercer Island. They will not acquiesce, but rather, as in the past, will fight to protect our public parkland, not only for themselves, but even more importantly, for future generations. The citizens have not allowed any building, no matter how seemingly important to the community, and what building is more essential to citizens than a fire station, to be built in Mercerdale Park since the recycling center was built there almost 50 years ago. The current proposal to use the recycling center for thrift shop donation drop-off and processing may have seemed harmless at first glance, but ignores the fact that the interior space is inadequate for the thrift shop donation and processing function. Bit by bit, inch by inch, plans have been floated over the past several months to expand the recycling center building. First, by enclosing the porches. Second, by actually tearing down the recycling center and building a new building on its footprint. Third, by leaving the recycling center as it is and adding a second building to the property, 35 feet by 35 feet, extending from the roof line of the current recycling center to the very edge of the asphalt right next to the native garden. And in a recent email from a city staff member to me, mentioned another possibility, at the same time seeming to disclaim it, in the statement that a new modular building would be, quote, most likely a one-story building, end quote. And what is to stop further expansion, perhaps onto the asphalt and even into the native garden and beyond, should the thrift shop decide to expand their online build and need even more reception space and processing space? It reminds me of the old adage, if you let the camel get his nose into the tent, his whole body will soon follow. There is an affirmative response to this conundrum by the City Council. Remove the constant temptation to use our parkland for other than parks. Put all the parkland into a conservancy. The council has bigger challenges facing it. It should focus on the vital few, not on the unnecessary many. And in conclusion, fortunately, there is at least one good alternative to the recycling center site, and maybe others. And that site is in back of City Hall on city land, where enough modular, multi-level space could be constructed adjacent to parking that is already there. I encourage you to pursue this option as well as other options, rather than further developing public parkland on our island. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg.
Deputy Mayor, our last speaker is Ira Appelman. I believe Ira wants to be on video and audio. Ira, we need you to unmute yourself.
I think I have, haven't I?
You have now, yes. And do you want to show your video?
How do I show my video? It's open, but the light hasn't come on. The host asked you to start. Okay, here it is. Start my video.
There you go.
Okay, it's on. Great. Ira Appelman, Mercer Island. As you know, I oppose your failure to notice thrift shop project and attack on Mercerdale Park. I'm into my 24th year in coming to these meetings, more than double the years of any of you. And the city has never done anything like the thrift shop project without plenty of notice to the neighbors and multiple opportunities for public participation. You're clearly committed to opacity, and you're using the pandemic to keep islanders uninformed. Your attack on Mercerdale Park is very much like attacks in the past 40 years. It doesn't seem to matter who's on the council. The council majority continues to see Mercerdale Park as vacant free land. This project is very similar to the last project, which started with the Youth Theater Northwest deal without any public participation. 5 years and hundreds of thousands of wasted city dollars later, after a knockdown, drag-out fight that embroiled the island community, the project was scrapped. The clear problem is that the city has way too much money. The city council's attacks on the parks and neighborhoods, such as the attack on Mercerdale Park and on the community facilities zoning tax on the JCC neighborhood, which are continuing because you're pursuing CFZ2, have cost the city hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. It's ironic that the city uses parks levy funds to attack the parks and the neighborhoods. The city gets millions of dollars in property taxes, which easily cover maintenance of our parks. The parks levy, which will come up for renewal soon, frees up millions of dollars to be used for any purpose, which has included a tax on our parks and neighborhoods. Those who care about our parks and neighborhoods cannot let the parks levy renewal succeed. Islanders often regret how we get into such battles that spill over into other aspects of island life. In the name of transparency, Islanders must be informed that, as in the past, the cause of the unrest is the City Council. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further appearances, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The next item of business is the consent calendar. The consent calendar contains the approval of the accounts payable reports for the periods ending October 2nd and October 9th, the approval of the certification of payroll dated October 9th, 2020, the approval of the minutes of the September 15th and September 22nd video meetings, AB 5763, one-year extension to the 2018-2020 police and police support collective bargaining agreements. Does anyone wish to pull an item off the consent calendar? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
Craig? And Lisa seconded. Thank you. City Clerk, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Thank you. Councilmember Anderall? Aye. Councilmember Neese?
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker?
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds?
Aye.
And Councilmember Jacobson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move to the first item of regular business, Agenda Bill AB 5768, a public hearing for the 2021-2022 biennial budget. Okay, so this public hearing is for the purpose of receiving comments on the 2021-2022 biennial budget. Individuals wishing to make a public comment on this agenda item may do so by telephone or by using the Zoom teleconferencing application, provided, however, they registered their desire to make a public comment with the city clerk by 4 p.m. today. Our city clerk will call on you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. This public hearing is now open as of 7:04. Those wishing to provide public testimony, please speak audibly, state your name for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. A 15-second warning will be provided when your time is about to expire. City Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for public comment that wishes to address the council?
Deputy Mayor Weicker, we have Ira Appleman who wishes to speak.
Ira, you still there?
Ira, we just need you to unmute yourself before you start speaking.
Am I unmuted?
You are good.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Ira Appleman, Mercer Island. I support the police budget with the addition of 2 police officers that Chief Holmes previewed last meeting. This is the 12th Mercer Island biennial budget presentation in which I've participated. For each previous budget, the City Council unanimously made clear that Mercer Island's #1 priority is public safety. We face public safety challenges today that we didn't face in the past. First, in its wisdom, the last City Council turned Mercer Island into a Grand Central station of East King County, with all westbound bus passengers disembarking at the North Mercer Way Park and Ride to catch light rail. Inevitably, some of those passengers will remain on Mercer Island, with a number of those presenting public safety challenges. Additionally, in its wisdom, the Seattle City Council is defunding the police and has been designated by the United States Department of Justice as an anarchist city. Those cities across the country that have defunded the police have experienced a spike in major crime. Furthermore, the Seattle City Council and mayor are encouraging the founding of homeless encampments by incentivizing developers to tear down affordable housing and by ignoring homeless encampments that are popping up all over the city. Mercer Island must plan and prepare now for the deterioration of public safety in Washington's largest city, which will inevitably negatively affect Mercer Island. It takes at least 1 year from the hiring of a police officer before that police officer is trained at the academy, apprenticed on the island, and capable to protect Mercer Island neighborhoods. Those new officers must be trained and capable before light rail opens on the island. We should also support the great work the department is doing to retrain our officers based on the latest techniques and laws, and supplement that work with feedback from our island community on their expectations for neighborhood policing. I think that feedback can be obtained professionally with consultants and not from bash the police listening sessions. The recent confused public discussions and rioting notwithstanding, the officers of the Mercer Island Police Department, with its justified reputation for constitutional policing, are the guardians of our rights. It's a fundamental truth that without constitutional policing, we have no rights. Past Mercer Island City Council have recognized this fundamental truth and have constructed public safety prioritized biennial budgets accordingly. That's it.
Thanks, Ira. If there is no further testimony, the public portion of this hearing is now closed as of 7:08. Okay, on to regular business. The second item of regular business is Agenda Bill 5764, Cultural Competency Trainings and Community Listening Sessions Appropriation. For that, we're going to welcome Chief of Administration, Allie Speeds.
Good evening, City Council. I'm going to try and share my PowerPoint. The last few times I've done that, it has not gone well, so bear with me. Oh, okay. Can you see that? Does that work? Yay, okay. Council, tonight I'm here to talk with you about the cultural competency training and community listening sessions that we have been discussing for the last few months. And I'm here to request appropriation for these trainings and listening sessions. The City Council provided direction to staff to develop annual training sessions for the City Council members and members of the city's boards and commissions, and then authorize the engagement of a facilitator and consultant to conduct a series of listening sessions with the community. The council developed a goal statement regarding these trainings and listening sessions to allow the Mercer Island Council to hear firsthand accounts from the community of racism and other discrimination. The sessions are supposed to be an opportunity to gather information to guide City Council policy in the future. For City Council members and boards and commission members, we have tentatively secured a trainer. Her name is Dr. Caprice Hollins from Cultures Connecting LLC. She would be presenting a training session to our City Council members and boards and commission members titled Understanding the Implicit Bias and the Impact of Racial Stereotyping. We have 3 sessions scheduled with her in November, excuse me, and December. The cost for these 3 training sessions is $10,000. We do have over 55 city officials to train in these 3 sessions. So that's why we thought it would be best to have 3. And then when it comes to the community listening sessions, we would also like to retain Dr. Caprice Hollins as our facilitator for these sessions. It will provide some continuity, and she will also have a little bit of a better idea about our community after going through the training with you. We are going to schedule 2 virtual community listening sessions. We can add a 3rd if that is needed or desired. And we will be scheduling these in the first quarter of 2021. As we spoke about at the last council, or the last time I was in front of the council regarding this topic, trainers are booked. I barely got the third training session on Dr. Holland's calendar. So we will get these scheduled in the first quarter of 2021. The cost for those is $10,000. The reason that the cost is around the same is that there is a lot more planning that goes into these community listening sessions. So there is a separate fee for that outside of the actual facilitating session. The next steps will be that staff will schedule each of the council members and boards and commission members at the 3 trainings. We will also then work with Dr. Hollins to schedule the community listening sessions for times and dates that will work for the community and don't conflict with other things. And then of course, we'll widely publicize when those dates are and how people can join. So tonight I'm here to ask for the council to appropriate $20,000 from the available fund balance from the general fund for the cultural competency trainings and for the community listening sessions. I'm available for any questions.
I have a question. I can't find a place to raise my hand, but this is Lisa. Wendy, is that okay? Or you're on mute?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So we're looking at for the first sessions, we're looking at like $1,000 an hour. Is that right?
Yeah, it's $3,000 for a half-day session, which is about 3.5 hours.
Okay. Why is that so expensive? I mean, we retain legal counsel for, $400, $500, $600 an hour. I mean, over $1,000 an hour just seems very rich to me.
So Dr. Caprice Hollins does say that she is, that there are people who are less expensive than her. This is the trainer that city staff used last year in 2019. So she has started to work with Mercer Island. I was very impressed with her caliber of work, her knowledge, her ability to engage those of us in the training. So I think that, the council has been asking for these trainings. I was able to secure Dr. Hollins, who we know is a great trainer. So, yes, it's expensive, but it's worth it for this community to have these sessions, I believe. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jake, you were next. Jake, did you have some comments?
Yes, well, I have a question. And that is, will the city council people be able to listen in on the community sessions?
Yeah, so the way that we haven't fully figured this out yet, but the way that I see this happening would be that the city council and Dr. Hollins would be listening as a group. Dr. Hollins would help facilitate the transitions between speakers, between questions and answers. She may do a small training session at the very beginning of the community listening session to get everybody on the same page. So the council will be the ones that will be listening. They will be seen, you guys will be, it will be your meeting to hear. So yes, absolutely.
Will these be done virtually as things currently stand?
Yes.
And
All right.
the final question, if I can break the long rule here, is how long are the community listening sessions scheduled to take place?
I don't think we'll go longer than 3 hours. And that's why we have that option for a third one if we need that. I think it's, I know Bellevue just did 3 different sessions last week, and I haven't gotten a rundown yet on how long they went for, but I think we'll have a start time and an end time, and that will keep comments. There's also different protocols we can put into place, 3 minutes or 5 minutes or those kinds of things that will work out.
Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Thank you. Thanks, Allie, for the work you do around this. I've been supportive of this since we started talking about it in the spring. I think this sends a really important message to the community that we're committed, to working on this, and just I'm excited about it. Thanks for all your work around it.
Welcome. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments? If not, is there a motion somebody would like to make?
Can I just ask, sorry, I was trying to raise my hand, I couldn't find the button. Ally, I was
Yes, go
wondering
ahead.
if you could maybe speak to what are the outputs of these sessions in terms of deliverables? I know that they're charging for the sessions, but there's obviously something that comes of this. And for us to be able to take action, or if it's not us, somebody else, what might those deliverables look like?
Right.
Ally, could I jump into, and I wanted to ask you a question that may help lead to Councilmember Nice's answer. Dr. Hollins had also offered perhaps to come and meet with the city council in an open meeting to actually build the framework for the listening session, is that correct? And we hadn't actually decided whether or not we would do that?
Right, and I think that's why there's a little bit of the buffer in the cost for the community listening sessions. I think it's something that Dr. Hollins would like to do so that she can talk with you as a group, set the stage for what the listening sessions will be, and then talk about what is the goal? What do you want to get out of these? And then how are you going to take the information and make it action? So yes, Councilmember Nice, that is a very important part of it. I think that she does have an hourly fee, so that's what we would pay for her to come and do the session with us, and then to do any follow-up work. We could have Dr. Hollins do some initial follow-up work, which we could then take and do more work on, or find someone else to help assist us with that.
Councilmember Reynolds?
Hi, I would like to move to appropriate $20,000 from the available fund balance in the general fund for cultural competency training for city council members and boards and commission members and community listen sessions on race and social justice.
Second.
Okay, the motion was made by Craig and seconded by Dave to approve. Deb, do you mind conducting a roll call vote?
So I raised my hand because I was still trying to grapple with the discussion.
I couldn't tell.
I'm concerned. I thought I heard you say maybe no deliverables, it's just the sessions, but I'm confused. Is that correct?
No, this is why we need Dr. Hollins to come and meet with you, so that you can help her understand what you're trying to get out of the sessions, and then determine if there are action items that, what are the themes, what are the possibilities of deliverables afterwards. It's hard for me to know what the council wants and is expecting to get out of the sessions, because we haven't had the discussion about that yet. So I think the thought is that we would have her come in early 2021, talk with the council at an open meeting about what the council wants to get out of the listening sessions, and then she can help us with that. And whether that's something she helps us with afterwards and gives to us, and then we move on with it, or we continue to have her services. Either way, if we do need to appropriate more money for that, we can come back to the council. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm listening to the public testimony tonight, and I'm sure the deputy mayor would agree. It'd be nice to be given a clean bill of health, would be one example, right? That we're not racist. But I suppose that's something that we should talk about with her.
Yeah.
Dave, you have your hand up still?
Oh, sorry, no.
Craig, your hand is up?
Yes, am I off mute? I hope.
Yep.
Okay. Couple of things. One, I'm fully in support of this. I think that many of us have received training like this from our employers, but there are a number of members on the boards and commissions and on the council that are either retired or self-employed or may work for small firms that haven't been getting this. So I think it fills an important gap to have the training, and also helps to have everybody speaking the same language and the same terminology and same concepts from a baseline that we'll get from sharing a common trainer. So I think that's very important. I think the community listen sessions are very important also. There are a number of rumors flying around the community about factors in the community that make it uncomfortable to be a minority resident here on the island. And I think having people speak up in a public forum, if they're willing to do so, gives us a chance to all hear the same stories. I think that's very important. I think Councilmember Nice's question about deliverables is an important one. I think that having a written report afterwards of some sort might be helpful to get. That's certainly something we can talk to the trainer about. I also hope that most of the council will attend the sessions so that hearing what we hear will be one of the deliverables that comes out of this. While I would love it if the report came out of this that, gee, we're great, we haven't done anything wrong, we're all not racist. I think that's an unlikely outcome. That, because I think everybody and every entity has things that they can work on, and I think it's important to go into this recognizing that we're probably going to come out of this with some direction of some things we can do better as a city, and that's one of the reasons I'm thinking that it's necessary to do this effort. So, fully supportive.
Okay, so I guess I'll take a turn and say I absolutely support this. I think it reinforces our support of the mayor's pledge from a few months ago. And I think at this moment in time where we are as a community and where we are as a country, it's important to be aware of our own inherent bias and cultural competency. And I'm so pleased that Allie was able to find a trainer who could do this work sooner rather than later so that we can be aware of what's happening within our city government with our elected officials and our boards and commission members, and then take this conversation to community. So absolutely 110% supported. So I look forward to this passing with a 4-2, because as you all know, with a 3-3, it doesn't. So with that, thank you for the motion, Craig, and the second, Dave. Is everybody ready to take the vote? Any more comments? Craig, your hand is up. No? All right, Deb, thanks for taking the roll call vote.
Councilmember Neese,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderl,
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds, Councilmember Reynolds, you're,
I'm now an unmuted aye.
thank you.
It's an advanced skill that button.
Deputy Mayor White.
That would be an aye. So thank you. That motion passes unanimously. I think that makes a powerful statement to our community. So the motion passes to appropriate $20,000 from the available fund balance in the general fund for cultural competency trainings for city council members and boards and commission members, and community listening sessions on race and social justice. Thank you, guys. Okay, the third item of regular business tonight is Agenda Bill 5767, additional coronavirus relief funds allocation for EOC costs in the Small Business Grant Program. Welcome, EOC Small Business Liaison, Sarah Bluvis.
Good evening, Council. I am going to share my screen very quickly for you all. All right, am I good to go?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is a very quick presentation. I know you all have a long night already ahead of you, so hopefully we can make this short and sweet. After the October 6th council meeting, we, myself and council members Reynolds and Jacobson, went away and refined the grant program scope that we had initially presented to you all in order to use up some of our coronavirus relief funds. So I'm going to quickly walk through the major edits that we made. All this information is in your agenda bill packet, but I just want to highlight really quickly for you all. So you had some direction for the grant program scope and the eligibility criteria. So first, we discussed at length moving to a flat award amount, at least $5,000 per grant recipient. So we've added that into the scope, keeping in mind that that amount can shift higher depending on the amount of eligible applicants and awards that we end up having. And then the other big piece with the grant program scope was shifting from a grant review committee evaluation system to a lottery system. I do have a slide that goes quickly through the lottery system, although that information is also in your agenda packet. And then with the eligibility criteria, there was discussion around the criteria related to employee count and revenues. So we opted to remove those requirements and put in some more specific prioritization requirements for the lottery system, which you'll see in your packet. We also specified that the physical location of an organization needs to be customer facing. As you may recall from our discussion back on the 6th, we were very interested and focused on supporting those businesses that really provide products and services to customers out of maybe a brick and mortar storefront or a location in town center or a South End business district. And then finally, just a kind of a minor piece of information to note, this wasn't necessarily something that came up in the discussion on the 6th, but after our meeting with council members Jacobson and Reynolds, we decided to shift the date by which the organization must have been in operation. So originally we proposed March 1st of 2019, and we've adjusted that to January 1st of this year. So still pre-pandemic, but a little more flexibility there. So I wanted to call your attention. I connected with our city attorney's office today, and they had some great suggestions for sort of overcoming the possibility or risk associated with the gift of public funds. So this is information that I'd like to add into the program scope. It doesn't change the intent of the program at all, but I wanted to be transparent and let you know that we've done the review with the attorney's office. So you can see this suggested language on the slide in front of you. The first is to the qualifying expenses section in the grant program scope. And this just references the additional guidance drafted by the Attorney General's office back in April when this discussion of pass-through grants and public funds from federal relief for the coronavirus pandemic started happening. And the second piece is to add in the eligibility criteria a bit of a qualification of what we mean by small business. Council members Jacobson and Reynolds and I talked about this, and I ultimately landed on sort of a different definition than what we had discussed, but still the same intent. A small business as defined by the Small Business Administration, I think will cover all of the businesses we hope to support during this time. And just a note, in the program scope and everywhere where we link to the application, there will be a link to the Small Business Administration website where those businesses who may be unsure if they are a small business under those standards can check. But it's definitely likely that if an organization received a PPP loan this year or has received federal or other government grants in the past, that they would definitely qualify under this. So one more slide before I get to my recommended action. This is just the outline of the lottery selection process. Again, also included in your packet. This is really modeled off of Bellevue and other lottery selections that we've seen in the area. The key thing is to note the prioritization that we've landed on for the different pools. So I didn't outline them here, but they are included in your packet. This is really a mechanism to kind of widen the pool for eligibility. We can potentially bring in more applicants for the program now, but the prioritization model will still allow us, even within the lottery selection process, to really prioritize those businesses who we know have been really hard hit throughout this pandemic. So here are our recommended actions tonight. First, we need to authorize the city manager to accept the CARES Act coronavirus relief funds from Washington State in the amount of $36,050. Second, to appropriate $270,000 to fund the Mercer Island COVID relief program for small businesses. And the third is to appropriate the remaining $97,050 to support the city's ongoing emergency operation response to the pandemic. That's all I have. I'll stop sharing if there's any questions for me.
Dave, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. A question about eligibility. Was there, and I wasn't in the meeting, so I'm not sure, but was there any conversation around maybe trying to identify any businesses that applied for PPP loans that were not able to get them due to lapse in funding or anything like that?
That's a good question. We did not discuss that explicitly, but within the program scope and within the application, we ask if they've received funding. Anyone who has or has not would not be disqualified from the program. But we do ask them to list, how these funds might be used differently. I do know that other programs around the region have prioritized businesses that didn't receive any funding above, those who have, but I think the business landscape on Mercer Island is perhaps smaller than some of those businesses or those communities. We saw that like in Redmond and City of Bellevue, much bigger business communities there.
All right, thank you.
Craig.
Yeah, Sarah, could you go back to the slide that you had on eligible expenses and the comments from the Attorney General or the attorney or whoever it was?
Yes, hold on just a second. Okay, can you see that?
Yep, that's the one. Well, first off, I should have started with this. Thanks for all your work with this and your patience with Councilmember Jacobson and I with our micro editing and micro did great work.
It was a great way to spend a Sunday.
Yeah, there we go. It's a good share of our Sunday. That's true. This first one on here on the slide is concerning me a little bit because it appears to be a material change in direction from where we were, if I'm understanding it correctly. So let me give an example. If I have a business in town center or an appropriate retail face that meets all the other requirements and my sales have dropped, so I'm having trouble paying rent or making payroll, am I correct that I'm not eligible for this money unless I can demonstrate that makes me in danger of permanent closing?
The intent of this addition, referencing the Attorney General's office, is really to make it abundantly clear that through this program, the city isn't intending to donate funds unless they are in support of issues and problems related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think that through the other criteria that we're requiring and through the application process, the businesses will be able to make the case for the need. I'm not necessarily seeking a certificate around whether or not they're going to go bankrupt or anything like that. This is more just kind of a general overview. This is what the language from the Attorney General's office says, and this is kind of the threshold that we're trying to prove. I would say that a business who's been having trouble paying rent or wants to make sure they can pay rent next month is in danger of closing, maybe not permanently, but temporarily or semi-permanently, because they need to pay rent in order to stay in their building and offer their services. So
yeah, I guess I'm just thinking of a business that maybe has lots of equity floating around. I don't know if there are many that fit in that category, but if maybe they can make rent, so they're not in danger of closing, but it's just going to be more painful for them. I would hope that they would not be excluded by this criteria, but you'll have to get appropriate advice on whether that applies.
Councilmember Reynolds, this is Bio speaking. Just to let you know, the addition of this sentence to the city's documents, it's to demonstrate that what the city is doing has a public purpose, that the city is in providing these funds to the business, that the city is fulfilling a public purpose. There's actually no a test or criteria, additional test or criteria that the fund applicants necessarily have to meet in order to comply with this.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, with that mild concern, I'm fully supportive of this. We've got the money. It's clearly a use it or lose it situation. We've got some businesses that are hurting. And there's really nothing else we could do in the short term we have available to spend this money. So this seems like the perfect opportunity to help out island businesses that are so essential to the culture of what is Mercer Island.
All right. Jake?
I think it was implicit in what Sarah had to say. And by the way, I share Craig's view that she's done an outstanding job of navigating the rocks and shoals of this thing, because there are not only a lot of requirements to look at, but also it's not going to be an easy process. I think it should be clear, but I'll make it even more clear, and that is that that we will be appropriating or allocating, if we approve this ordinance, or move to accept this agenda bill. We are taking the maximum amount to the city, some $97,050, I think the amount is, that we can take and use, given criteria. So and the remaining money, about approximately $270,000, is money that is going to need to be used for this purpose or simply returned. And while I'm not an advocate of spending money just to get to zero, the businesses on this island there are many of them that are hurting. A lot of them are one or two or just a family operation. That I was reminded about that today when I was doing some shopping and seeing that some places don't have employees anymore because they can't afford to have them, and so it's the family or the individual owner is there and no one else. So I share Craig's approval of this procedure, and I'm prepared to move that we adopt this.
Anybody else?
If that was a formal motion from Jake, I'll second it. Wasn't sure if you were saying you're prepared to move or we're moving, but if it is a move.
I move that we, number one, accept the funds from the state of Washington, that we authorize the portion of those funds to support about $270,000 to support the grant to Small Business Relief Program, and that another $97,050 be appropriated to the city to defray eligible COVID-19 expenses that we've incurred as a city.
Okay.
Support the city's emergency operation in response to the pandemic,
That's part of it.
as written in the agenda bill.
Yeah.
Ally, does that?
Okay. I will second. Yeah.
Deb, does that motion suffice to accept the funding and then appropriate it as Jake outlined?
Deputy Mayor, to be clear, I would just like to repeat what we're requesting and confirm that Councilmember Jacobson agrees, if I may.
Yep.
The first part is to authorize the city manager to accept CARES Act coronavirus relief funds from Washington State in the amount of $360,050. The second part is to appropriate $270,000 to fund the Mercer Island COVID-19 relief for small business grant program. And then the third part of that is to appropriate $97,050 to support the city emergency operation response to the pandemic.
Better than I said it. Perfect.
Thank you.
This is
And to be
Bill,
clear,
the city attorney. To be clear, the motion, there should be a separate motion for each of the parts and a separate vote, so that in case any council members wish to, only approve part of the three, that they would have the option to do so.
If that's the case, I'll strike my motion, and I will instead move that the city, that we authorize the city manager to accept the additional CARES funding from the state of Washington in the amount of $367,50.
Second.
Okay, so the motion was made by Jake and seconded by Lisa. City Clerk, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Okay. Councilmember Anderall?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson?
Aye.
Councilmember Neese?
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds?
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye. Okay, who'd like to make the second motion to appropriate $270,000 to fund the Mercer Island COVID-19 relief for small business grant program?
I so
So
moved.
moved.
Moved by Salim and seconded by Jake. Okay, City Clerk, will you please conduct the roll?
Deb, did we get an actual second on that? I want to make sure.
Yes, I seconded it.
Okay, thanks.
Jake.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderl. Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
And Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Okay, is there a motion to appropriate $97,050 to support the city's emergency operation in response to the pandemic?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Craig made the motion, Dave seconded it. City Clerk, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderl. Councilmember Jacobson.
Aye.
Councilmember Neese.
Aye.
Great, all three motions pass. So moving on to the fourth item of regular business tonight is Agenda Bill 5768, receive the 2021-2022 preliminary budget. Please be advised that a public hearing was held earlier this evening. To lead this discussion, we welcome City Manager Jesse Bond and Interim Finance Director Matt Mornick.
All right, good evening, City Council. Similar to our presentation last week, we will get rolling here with our PowerPoint, and I will look to you all for appropriate times to take a break. Also, we will stop periodically to answer questions. Give me just a moment to open the PowerPoint. All right. Okay, I'll get started, and then we will have Matt Mornick, our Interim Finance Director, join me. I will also remind you that the entire leadership team and a number of our other management staff are here this evening virtually and will be available to answer your questions. This is our agenda for this evening. First of all, just a quick budget recap. I wanted to follow up on some items from the last meeting, particularly related to funding for staff positions. Talk a little bit about the general fund surplus again. We have 3 departments that we need to walk through this evening, and then turn our attention to the capital improvement program. As a reminder, Council, we're here tonight to answer questions and to support your discussion. We are looking towards the November 2nd meeting date where we will be entertaining budget proposals and starting to make decisions to finalize our budget. And I jumped a little bit ahead there. So tonight we had our first public hearing. We will have another public hearing on November 17th. And I think I've gone over most of the schedule, although I do want to confirm. I met with council leadership, I think it was a week and a half ago, Mayor Benson Wong, Deputy Mayor Weicker, and Councilmember Neese. And we have decided to add a presentation to the November 2nd meeting. It will be a presentation by our bond counsel regarding potential ballot measures and things you may want to consider should you be interested in adding a ballot measure to the 2021, adding a ballot measure, in 2021. For the public that may be watching and hearing this for the first time, this is an item that's been discussed at the MIYFS working group, specific to a ballot measure to support YFS, and that's the genesis for this presentation request. So more on that on November 2nd. A reminder, this was the expenditure snapshot we shared at the meeting last week. The 2021-22 expenditure budget is $142.4 million. Council, we worked through most of the general fund discussion last week. We have a little bit remaining tonight. We will turn our attention to the Youth and Family Services Fund, and I'll be looking for some direction from you this evening, particularly around revenue assumptions. And then we'll be finishing tonight with our capital improvement program. A follow-up from the last meeting, I wanted to mention that, let me make an adjustment here on my end for the viewers at home. We reviewed the various funds last meeting that make up the city's biennial budget. And one of the things that we did not do is we didn't cover in detail the fund split for the various positions. Some funds are exclusively general fund, and then we have, some positions are exclusively general fund. We have other positions that are split across multiple funds. In fact, I wanted to mention that as we contemplated updating the budget format, which unfortunately we were not able to do this year, we realized some shortcomings of our current budget, and this is one of them. It's not clear how each of the positions are funded. So I wanted to walk through a couple tables tonight, and then know that I'm adding this to the list for the next budget when we look at updating our format to make sure this information is available. I think it's important to understand how each position is funded. In your budget, what we do have is a summary of positions by fund. And I'll remind you, council, as we go through the PowerPoint tonight, the lower right-hand corner, this is the page reference to your budget notebook. I know some of you are here at City Hall tonight, and I saw you with your budget notebook, so that's fantastic. So this is a snapshot of all of your funds and how many positions are in each fund. I've already noted, in fact, where you see partial positions, that's because some positions are funded across multiple funds. This still doesn't tell you, though, about individual positions. So that's something that we'll talk about here in just a minute. I'll remind you, this was a slide taken from the September 22nd council presentation on the organizational structure. And the city manager's recommended staffing level, and that's what's included in the 21-22 preliminary budget. It largely reflects our status today, the September 2020 staffing levels. I guess we could say October 2020 staffing levels now, with a few changes. And those positions are noted in the organizational charts in that gold color. So these are positions that are either new or restored, and they are included in the preliminary budget. Stated another way, they are technically funded right now in the way the budget is proposed. There's another list of positions that are shaded in purple. Those positions are part of budget proposals, and they are not included yet in the preliminary budget. I'll be looking for direction from the City Council on November 2nd as to those positions, and certainly willing to talk about the positions in gold as well. So what I wanted to do, and apologies for the chart and the small text, is just share a little bit more about those positions in gold and in purple and explain the funding. I realized in talking with several of you after the last meeting that this wasn't clear. For example, the customer service supervisor and the customer service representative positions, you may recall we're proposing to centralize our customer service function. Primarily, those positions are funded by the general fund, with some portion of those positions supported by stormwater, capital, and utility funds. And you might say that, why is that? Well, it's because the work they're doing supports those other funds. We have been tracking our call center function in detail since about April. So we're tracking calls and emails that come into the city that our EOC customer service team is responding to. So we have some initial data that tells us how those positions should be billed, and that's data that we'll continue to track. The utility fund, just a reminder, is basically back charging these positions through the overhead allocation rates. We started to get into that a little bit in some of the email questions today from the council member. The next two positions, a little bit different story. The permit technician and the planner position in the planning department. You'll see the little number 2 there and the number 4. That tells you that these are positions that were restored. They were laid off as part of the workforce reduction. Part of the workforce reductions we implemented this spring, and they're proposed to be restored. And a reminder that although those positions are part of the general fund, they are intended to be backed by permit revenue. Okay, so those are those two positions. The next two positions in the YFS fund, the Healthy Youth Initiative Prevention Specialist, is in the YFS fund, but is 100% grant funded. Okay, so we've noted that there, that's 0.8. That's also an LTE position, I believe, which means limited term because it's grant funded. The programs assistant, a half-time position that we restored actually recently in 2020, is also out of the YFS fund. All right, and now we'll get into some additional information regarding the recreation team, and we'll be talking about this more in just a moment. The Operations Transition Team Manager, which is a job title that is for a position that's doing both EOC work, recreation work, thrift shop management work. It's basically part of the EOC team managing a number of transition functions for the city. That is, you see a number 3 there, that's an LTE position. So that means that I have only proposed funding for that position for 2021, limited term. And the same can be said for the Recreation and Operations Coordinator position on the next line. Both of those positions show up in the Recreation Transition Team budget as one-year positions only, out of the general fund. The reason that I did this is because these aren't intended to be long-term positions. I do hope over the course of 2021, hopefully as soon as the first quarter to be exact, that we will begin working on our recovery plan and identify positions to resume or start to resume operations for the community center, recreation programs, and our arts programs. In just a minute, I'll show you, this impacts your general fund surplus. You may recall that you've got $800,000 surplus right now, ongoing surplus in 2021, and $1 million about in 2022. It's because of these two positions. These two positions were only funded in the budget in 2021. That's why the difference is there. Recreation and Operations Coordinator position. This is a position that's on the list as new, although we've had somebody in this role temporarily. This is an ongoing position. This person is primarily managing the functions that we are still performing, including athletic field rentals and customer service support for the recreation division. So that is a position that is restored and is funded across both years. The other positions, I'll just point out, I believe most of these fall into the Public Works and Operations Department, which we'll be talking about a little later this evening. Your Deputy Public Works Director, you can see that that position is proposed to be funded across multiple functions. And when we get there, remember this position now is proposed to oversee all of the maintenance functions, which includes water, sewer, stormwater, parks, and streets. That's why you see the position fund split the way it is. The Parks Foreman position, primarily a general fund position, also recalled or restored, I should say. This was budgeted. We didn't fill the position, so we're proposing to fill it in the next biennium. A small amount of money to support some limited capital work, but most of that position is general fund. 2 new positions, the Support Services Manager and the City Works Coordinator. Again, I'll just note that they're split across a couple funds. When we get to the department, we can discuss more the proposed function of those positions. The City Works Coordinator, I've contemplated whether or not we should call that something else, like an Asset Management Coordinator, which is really what that position is intended to do. The custodial positions, we'll certainly be talking about these this evening. These are new positions proposed to replace contracted services, primarily general fund, with a small amount to the YFS fund for the Luther Burbank building. Your CIP project managers and your development engineer positions are not funded out of the general fund at all. Those two positions are actually in the street fund, capital improvement fund, and utility fund. Clear as mud. That's a lot. I'm happy to come back to this chart if you'd like to discuss it. Why don't I show you the next table, and then that may be a good time to pause for some quick questions if you need clarification, or know that most of these positions will be discussed later this evening. All right, the positions that we've colored in purple because they are budget proposals and not yet funded by the council, here's how they break down. Your police officers, we have 2 on the budget proposal list. Those are general fund positions exclusively. We have a financial analyst position, and I should note the patrol officers are proposed to start in 2022. The same is true for the financial analyst position, also a request for 2022, split 50-50 between the general fund and the utility fund. This is a position that we intend to have support our pretty robust utility function. The senior policy analyst position in the planning department, exclusively a general fund position, and not eligible based on what we've contemplated to be a permit-backed position. Now, if this position were a planner and a policy analyst, then yes, it would be eligible perhaps to be supported by permit revenue. The economic development coordinator, as contemplated, is a 100% general fund position. The sustainability program manager is actually split, general fund, 35,000, and the bulk to the utility funds. I do anticipate we'll talk about this position a little bit later this evening. And park maintenance casual labor, this is all your seasonal staff for parks, is 100% general fund. One thing I just wanted to mention really quick, I want to go back to this slide. These 2 positions, if you can see my cursor, they're operations transition team positions. I've already mentioned this. These 2 individuals or positions will continue supporting EOC functions of the city, as well as some of these other positions. I mention that, Council, because should additional funding become available in 2021 to support EOC functions, we certainly have positions that would qualify for that funding. It's hard to say right now if that funding becomes available, but I want you to know that we're prepared for that should we become eligible for additional federal funding. Deputy Mayor Weicker, why don't I pause there? That was a lot of data and a lot of information. If there's any questions now, happy to field them. Otherwise, happy to pick up the conversation when we get to the positions later.
Salim's hand has been up for a while, so why don't we see what he has to say?
Go ahead, Salim.
So thanks for that. I only saw the footnote number 5 on the janitorial position, so I assume that's the only positions that we're going to talk about that are swapping contract for FTE.
That's correct.
The question I had is, we've obviously learned a lot in the pandemic, and we now know that having a reserve for the unemployment is critical. And I'm wondering if you built into the cost of these positions any of the liability that goes with the position. So the unemployment, the healthcare benefits, any of the extra stuff that goes into having an employee, or are those just the salary numbers?
Lawan will confirm the cost estimates are fully loaded in terms of salary plus benefits. We didn't factor in, I guess what I would call an unemployment liability. That is not included in the positions. Lawan, did you want to add anything further?
Nope, that's correct. I would say they're fully loaded with benefits for what we know, but the unemployment is not something that's factored into those costs.
So since we're kind of doing an ROI on trading a contract for 2 FTEs, are we sure that the liability doesn't exceed the benefit of those 2 positions? You know, you're talking about 39 weeks, I guess, in a COVID situation, and then 50% of that, so it's like $60,000 on top of the $156,000. You know, you're well over $200,000 for a year of janitorial. And if you ask those people to stop doing their job because you shut your buildings down again, you know, your ROA may be eroded by that employment.
So that's a great point. And Councilmember Neese, you're doing fast math on me again, but I think I followed most of what you just said. Here's what I will just mention. I'd like to have Jason Kittner, we can either do it now or wait till we get to Public Works, talk about why we're proposing to move from a contract model to a staffing model. It has to do with service delivery, and oh, there he is, and performance issues, frankly, that have been going on for a long period of time. During the pandemic, I feel confident in saying that we would not be laying off these employees. In fact, the need for custodial services has gone up exponentially as a result of the pandemic. We've been able to redeploy custodial staff that were assigned to the community center to support all of our buildings, but that's one FTE and a part-time employee. The rest of the sanitation work is being performed by contract. But your point is valid, right? You know, you bring on a staff, and if we end up in another situation where we're facing layoffs, we may be going backwards. Jason, did you want to chime in there? I see your screen's on.
I think you did a really good job summarizing it. I think we have learned absolutely through the pandemic that our custodial services are invaluable, and they are one of the most important and critical positions we have in our organization during this pandemic. When the pandemic happened early, we assessed our current contract, and as we've talked about before, we're obviously subject to public bidding requirements and things like that. And so oftentimes we're forced to take the low responsive bid. Sometimes it doesn't always work out on the equal side of positive service for us. When the pandemic happened, we evaluated our options, and we brought that high touch, frequent areas and disinfection service in-house. We reallocated our existing custodian staff that was primarily serving the community center. So when the community center closed, we were able to reallocate her to the other city buildings. I'll also note that it's important that, you know, we'll talk about levels of service and parks maintenance in particular, also with the right-of-way team. But when the pandemic happened early on, many of those crew members actually had to move over and help do that disinfection service in our city buildings, a high-touch frequency cleaning just to help out as well. So there was, you know, there's a ripple effect down there for the pandemic, but we definitely learned the value of these positions, and Jesse's absolutely right. These aren't positions that would, in the pandemic, that we're going to be cutting. They're just too valuable to the operations.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then I would just say that if that's the case, and if custodial services are have a lot of longevity in a pandemic environment, maybe if you look at the other positions that possibly don't, do we need to create an entry or reserve or something to account for those unemployment services that would be accrued for those positions? I don't know which ones are subject to cuts in a pandemic if things get worse.
Well, I hope Councilmember Neese, I know I have employees watching today that are probably concerned. I hope we're at a stable staffing level and not facing another situation where we have to have layoffs in the next biennium. But I appreciate what you're saying, and we created an unemployment reserve this year to address unemployment costs. From an operational perspective, it was so much cleaner than billing those costs back to the individual departments. It saved us a lot of time. And I'll have to have Lawan pop back in here. Our budget does not include, it's basically the reserve we have now is I believe proposed to carry forward, but we have not proposed to increase it. Is that correct, Lawan?
There's nothing built into the preliminary budget to increase that. I think what we had hoped to do is if that $300,000 reserve that we created is underspent, which it's tracking so far that we're not going to spend 100% of that we would look to carry that over in the first quarter of 2021, whatever remained.
Okay, well, it sounds like you have your eye on it, and I think, you know, given the audience that we have here tonight, my comments are around preserving our resources so that we don't contract further than we need to. And then as we start things back up, being prudent in the way that we build back up. And so if there's a $300,000 reserve that has a little bit of headroom in it, I think that's fine. But if we need to have the discussion about adding to it as we ramp back up, I would be open to that as well.
That's great. Looks like Councilmember Anderl, you have your literal hand up.
Because I cannot find the figurative hand on this screen in this conference room.
We have her set up in a kind of a special technology setup this evening, so thank you for working with that.
I'm in the hole, I'm in solitary confinement. But, so the question that I have is, you talked about the new positions, and maybe we're gonna get to this down the road, but if, looking at the question of whether we're going to pursue the 1% increase in the property tax levy, if the council doesn't do that, are there specific recommendations on which positions don't get funded?
That's a great question. My recommendation to you, and again, I've presented the city manager's budget with a surplus by design. My recommendation is to fund what I have proposed. And then, you know, if you don't fund the 1%, that comes out of the the general fund surplus that's unappropriated right now. So the 800,000 and the million in 2022. So my recommendation would be to pull that from the resources you have to consider budget proposals.
Okay, I probably need a little bit more information on that, but.
And it might help if we keep going, because I know we've got lots of numbers flying around at this point.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, I'll pick back up. Councilmember Neese, that was a fantastic segue to this slide. At the last council meeting, we were asked about where we are with unemployment costs. As I just mentioned, you allocated $300,000 from contingency to establish an unemployment reserve this year. It's difficult to determine our unemployment costs. As a reminder, City Council, we're self-insured, which means that we cover all of our unemployment costs. However, the CARES Act, in this case, has covered 50% of unemployment costs for self-insured entities like ours. Some things that create variables for us is we do have a model that shows what we may pay, the maximum amount we may pay in unemployment costs, but someone that's been laid off may find another job, as has been the case with many of our staff. They also may not apply for unemployment or not utilize all of the benefits. We're still working on, as you may recall, there was a pretty significant issue with fraudulent claims. Washington State is still working on that, and that may benefit us as claims are resolved. And then there's an additional federal supplement that's been applied to unemployment claims. So where we are, we just got the third quarter statement today. To date, we've paid $160,000 in unemployment costs. Quarter two was our highest. We were actually forecasting or projecting that quarter three would be a little bit higher than what it actually was. So that number just came in today. As I just mentioned, the reserve is in place, intended to roll over to the next biennium. We can certainly talk about whether or not we should increase that, particularly with the one-time funds you have available. And I think just to follow up on Councilmember Neese's comments, you know, one of the concerns is if we ramp up too quickly, either recreation or thrift shop, for example, and there's something else, you know, happens, hopefully not related to the pandemic, are we shutting down again and laying off staff? And that's something that we need to be mindful of. My recommendation is, you know, slow, steady, mindful to avoid that uncertainty. Okay, this is to Councilmember Anderl's question in terms of the general fund surplus. I had a question from a council member after the last presentation, and I realized I may have caused a little confusion with a comment I made. So in your budget, you have an unassigned fund balance in the general fund, and we will be asking you as part of this process to appropriate those funds. Now, appropriate doesn't mean spend them. You can appropriate funds to a reserve. We just need you to tell us where these funds go. So you have an ongoing surplus in the general fund. That's about $800,000 in 2021 and about $1 million in 2022. This is tied to ongoing revenues like property tax and sales tax and B&O tax. Okay, so that's your ongoing, what we call revenues exceeding expenditures in the general fund. You also have a one-time carryover from prior years that was not appropriated. This is about 3.6 million. And what I said at the last meeting that I realized may have been misunderstood was, earlier in 2020, the staff was asked about this $3.6 million, and it was suggested, why aren't we using this right now to help with the revenue losses? My recommendation in 2020, earlier 2020, at the time was hold. We're going to need these one-time funds for 2021. So the council member I spoke with misunderstood and said, Jesse, I understand you don't want us to use this one-time money. No, that's not the case. I didn't want you to use it earlier this year. But in this case, and as part of the budget process, I do want you to appropriate these funds. They're sitting out there unappropriated. So some suggestions, and you don't have to decide tonight. This is a discussion that we want to have with you on November 2nd is, how do we appropriate these funds, particularly that one-time carryover from prior years? I know you've mentioned an interest in increasing the Left 1 reserve. That would be a way to use these funds. Setting aside one-time funding to restart the community center, the recreation programs, the thrift shop, that would be a good use of the funds. Other one-time budget proposals, you have quite an extensive list of projects and plans that aren't funded yet. Things like the classification and compensation study, the town center parking study. These would all be really good uses of one-time funds. So we're headed there November 2nd, and I just wanted to revisit this slide because I'm afraid I may have misspoken previously. Before we move on, I want to make sure there's an understanding of the general fund surplus, what's available. Is there any questions?
Craig has his hand up.
Thank you. Can you just clarify on the unemployment funds, there was a $300,000 reserve and $160,000 for unemployment expenses. Are you proposing or planning to use any of that reserve to fund those expenses or just hold the reserve, carry it through?
We are actively using the reserve, so when the Employment Securities Department bills us for unemployment costs, we are taking it out of that reserve fund. We're drawing down that reserve.
So is it effectively at about $140,000 balance then now, the 300 less the 160?
Although we haven't paid the Q3 invoice yet, we just got it today, but yes, it's being drawn down. Lawan will probably want to technically clarify something I just said.
Oh, that is absolutely correct. We are drawing it down as we're paying those quarterly.
Okay, good. That makes sense. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, let's keep rolling. And, all right. So just to follow up to the previous slide, again, council, what budget proposals or other items should we consider funding in 21 and 22? We've put forth as a staff budget proposals for your consideration. This is your budget. This is your policy document. You may have other budget proposals you'd like us to consider. What reserves? I think we've just had a great conversation about the unemployment reserve. What else do we need in reserve to address future needs? How are we continuing to plan for the COVID-19 pandemic? Certainly a big variable in our life heading into the next biennium. Are there other priorities that aren't reflected in the budget? And tonight we'll also be looking for feedback on the capital improvement program. I'll continue to pose these questions to you. So now let's turn our attention to where we left off on October 13th and pick up with the department discussions. We saved the best for last. Truly, these are the departments that have certainly had the most changes as a result of the pandemic. We will start with Public Works / Operations, which has grown pretty considerably as the city restructured due to workforce reductions and other transitions. So let me just make an adjustment here for people watching at home. A reminder, and it's hard to see this text in bold, Public Works includes administration, capital and engineering services, right-of-way or streets, all of your utilities functions, solid waste, facilities management, previously was in the finance department and then the city manager's office, and now it's in Public Works, fleet, park maintenance, also recently moved, and the Customer Field Response Services, which is the team that handles maintenance issues on a day-to-day basis. So what I highlighted here, and it's really tough to see on my screen, may be difficult on your end, is the capital and engineering services teams have combined and centralized in Public Works. So previously, capital projects were distributed across the city, across multiple departments. We're centralizing most of our capital project work with one team and also moving our engineering staff to the same team. This is really important cross-training, organizational stability type of move. Facilities management, I just mentioned, it's moved around a bit in the organization. We think it's important to tie it back to our operations team. This is the crew that oversees all of our city's buildings. And then park maintenance, formerly part of the Parks and Recreation Department, which has been very significantly impacted by the pandemic, is moved to Public Works and part of a greater maintenance team. As I mentioned in our presentation last week, on your budget pages, starting on page D52, we've presented a pretty detailed work plan for the Public Works Department. Some highlights, really focusing on asset management now, standard operating procedures. We've dedicated a position as proposed in the budget to steward the city's asset management system and work closely with our maintenance teams and our capital teams. A new master facility use agreement with the Mercer Island School District. This is really about shared facilities. We're working on that now. Succession planning, this will be my drumbeat for a long time. We have retirements coming in the Public Works Department in key positions, and we need to focus on cross-training there. Certainly infrastructure. Maintaining, stewarding, repairing, replacing the city's most critical infrastructure is one of my top priorities, and it's reflected in the budget. Certainly our maintenance and operations teams are preparing for the opening of light rail in 2023. And we're working on advancing our sustainability practices throughout our organization and certainly within the community. What I'd like to do now is invite Jason Kittner to join me and talk through the specific budget proposals within his department. Whoops. And then I think what I'll do is I'll stop screen sharing, as I imagine there's some questions about budget proposals in this department specifically. Jason?
Thanks, Jesse. Before I get into the budget proposals, just a couple other tidbits on the work plan, and that is, you talked about our CityWorks, our asset management system. I think it's really important that you understand that we are, this is a new business system that was implemented for Public Works about 1.5 years ago. It rolled out to our utility teams, our right-of-way team, and fleet, but it's now being rolled out to parks maintenance and our buildings. And so what we've learned with our system is it's really important to put good data in to get good data out and make data-driven decisions. And so we need to continually update and modify our work plans, our standard operating procedures, and our workflows. And so that's why you're seeing us invest in this system. It's very important for our future reinvestment needs across utilities and parks and streets as well. The other piece I'll just note too is we talked about you talked just briefly on the interlocal with the school district, but it's also important to note that on the work plan is renegotiating the WashDOT maintenance agreements for Albert Davis Park. That will be a substantial work that's tied to the levels of service for that park facility as well. And then getting into the budget proposals, just to go through these sort of one by one. As you see here, our sustainability program manager, again, only part of this position is funded as tied to the general fund. The rest is being supported through utilities. As we talked about last week, this position is really going to be focused on what we can do within our operational teams. This position will continue to support those efforts, but I think it's important that this position come into our department, work with our operating teams, work with our capital team. There's opportunities for modifications and improvements. I'll I'll be very blunt. We have, with buildings and facilities coming back into public works, we have an opportunity to look at our HVAC systems and other building modifications that can actually generate some pretty substantial sustainability opportunities for us. A recent example is our mechanic shop bay. The lights need to be replaced. They're continually outdated. Getting those retrofitted with LED or an LED conversion, that type of O&M integration is important. Another piece to the sustainability program manager role will be the integration with our stormwater program and our parks and natural resources space. Many of our water courses run through our open space areas, and it's important that we don't work in silos and that we continue to integrate those two functionalities together. It's tied back to our MPDS permit, which this position plays an important role in our annual reporting and permit requirements. So really this position is focused really on the operating side of the house within public works. And when I say operating, I'm also expanding to the capital side. We really haven't had this position focus with our engineering team to look at sustainability options for capital improvement projects. Are there other suitable materials to be used for a bidding climate? Should an alternative bid proposal be identified and costed out to come back to the council to see if there's interest in moving forward with that option? This position will be important to helping the engineers and the project managers develop that scope of work early in the project, looking at alternatives to be used and coming back with recommendations. Moving on to the parks maintenance casual labor. This is incredibly important to our operations. As I think we've all seen through our park system, we've had a significantly reduced level of service within our park system. We definitely had a hiccup with the COVID pandemic early on, but due to our staffing resources, we have not been able to respond and rebound as quickly as we would hope. I think it's important that the council and the community understand that currently, as funded in the preliminary budget, which does not include this budget proposal, your level of service that you're seeing in the parks now will likely what you would see next year. For some perspective, we didn't open up the Groveland restroom facility. We didn't open up the Clark Beach restroom facility. We actually put porta potties in those parks because we didn't have the staff resources to get through and open up those facilities this summer. We didn't open up the Luther Burbank dock restroom facility. Our staff was really focused on safety and sanitation, and it took away from our opportunity to do the planter bed beautification and other things that make our park system so wonderful. I'll also note that in the base budget, we are still one FTE on the parks maintenance side short from where we were last year. This position was a COVID casualty. It was eliminated and it was not proposed to be restored in the new budget. So this team is significantly impacted. They have a tremendous workload. And this parks maintenance casual labor funds 8 to 10 positions within our park system to really help with the peak season and the use that our parks see. The town center parking study, this is a one-time cost to bring in a consultant to look at our parking code, restrictions, and look for opportunities to improve our parking in the town center, provide recommendations to us regarding specifically parking in the town center. And then finally, our town center beautification. Council and the community recall that during the last budget process, this was a budget cut as well. $60,000 to fund, again, casual labor within the right of way. Focused in the town center, it's some casual labor dollars, as well as irrigation and our annual flower program within the town center. So your hanging baskets, planter bed, median maintenance, and then obviously some deferred maintenance on our sidewalk repair, track repairs and things like that. And so those are budget proposals in a nutshell.
And Jason, if I could just go back quickly to the town center parking study. City Council, one of the things I hear about often is our town center permit parking program. The fees are too low, it needs to be updated. I couldn't agree more. The intention of this study is not only to look at our parking codes, our ordinance, how we're managing our parking, but also to take a look at that permit program and provide a recommendation on what we need to do to prepare for light rail and commuter parking, while we're also supporting the importance of parking for our business community in the town center. So I just want to let you know, Council, where we are. We're on page D61 of the budget notebook. We didn't, and at this point, this is the last slide I have on Public Works, so I'll stop sharing for our discussion.
Anybody have any questions?
I fully anticipate there's questions on this department.
Okay, I'll start. Will the sustainability manager have some responsibilities around communications, Jason? I know a lot of sustainability involves a lot of outreach and education and partnering with our vendors and franchise agreement holders and all of that. So tell me how that communication is going to work with all the work on that position's plate.
Sure, absolutely. The short answer is yes, and I will quickly be the first one to let you know that we can do better within our public works projects to communicate with our community about what's going on. And so this position would absolutely be helpful in that process. Yes, there's definitely crossover between our solid waste contract and other uses, but you know, it's the project managers, the engineers, we tend to be pretty project focused, and sometimes we miss the boat on that communication and public outreach piece. And so that's an area that we do need to improve upon. That will be part of this position as well. Helps with that.
And Council, I failed to mention, this was part of our September 22nd presentation. You may recall that current status is we have a split position, 0.6 communications manager, 0.4 sustainability manager. My observation, and this is my doing, right, I take full responsibility for it. In 2019, based on a whole number of issues that happened that year, and most of 2020, I've had to divert that FTE to focus almost exclusively on communications. And we're not getting to the sustainability work that is on our work plan. What's been on our work plan is coordination with K4C, data collection, and some policy management and special projects. All of that's been shelved. What's proposed here is that and integration into our operations team to support specific functions of the city. So just, again, I apologize, we didn't segue very well.
Love that. All right, Jake.
Jesse, you and I have talked several times about ways we'd go about harnessing the volunteer potentialities of our community to do things that we simply can't do. And I know that has some implications with bargaining units and some other stuff. And it strikes me that some of the park maintenance, for example, is something that would be susceptible to being improved by volunteer efforts, whether it's adopt a park or whatever it is. So my question is this: what's your thinking on how we go about harnessing volunteer energy on this island for any purpose?
We have talked about this quite a bit, haven't we, Councilmember Jacobson? Councilmember Jacobson is my absolute #1 supporter of volunteer initiatives, and he's been fantastic through the pandemic. Certainly right now, we are very limited in maintenance resources, and it has been next to impossible to undertake any supervision or coordination of volunteer work in our parks. We do have a small but mighty volunteer crew that's been teaming with our natural resources staff for a number of years. They are still working, particularly at Homestead Park. We have resumed some of our natural resources work. We oftentimes contract with groups like Earth Corps to come in and lead volunteer projects. Beyond that, our capacity is going to be continually limited. That being said, we're starting to talk about what the recovery plan looks like for recreation and the thrift shop. And in my opinion, that plan needs to include volunteers in a bigger way and maybe a new way than what we were doing previously. Councilmember Jacobson, I think that certainly also applies to park maintenance. So what I would say is, as we build our recovery plans, and this will take us into 2021, we need to keep that in mind. Our approach to volunteers has been decentralized, and I don't think that's been been good for the city are the volunteers. You know, there's no single point of entry. If you want to come volunteer for the city, you have to call a bunch of people and get connected. So that's one thing we're talking about. How do we streamline this? I don't want to add a staff position to solve a problem, but we may in fact be looking at a volunteer staff position to maximize the volunteer resources. So I don't have a proposal right now, Councilmember Jacobson. I think we should keep it on the table as part of our recovery planning work. I do need to mention with park maintenance work, depending on what it is, it may have to be bargained with the union. The union is a good partner to the city and is usually happy to support one-time events and things like that. So we would need to work on that.
Thank you.
Salim, did you have a comment? Your hand was up and down. No, anybody else? Okay, keep going.
All right. The Recreation Transition Team. This is, as it states, it's a transitional team. We no longer have the version of the Parks and Recreation Department that we had in 2019. What we've done, as council, as I've already mentioned, you're well aware, the community center closed in March. We stood down most of our recreation services and arts programs immediately, and also stopped facility rentals at the community center. In the intervening months, we have been able to resume athletic field rentals with restrictions. So we started scheduling those this summer. We're continuing to support that function. So this team, it is a one-year budget proposal that would bring forth to the council in Q1. We anticipate a transition plan. Basically, how are we going to come back from this operationally and financially? We need to, I think it was Councilmember Neese earlier that said, you know, we need to be careful and measured in our approach. If we move too fast, we risk resources, we risk pandemic impacts. The other thing that it just happened, the way things evolved, the staff that are working as part of this group now also provide general EOC support to the city, and that's intended to continue. So a couple slides here. This is, as I've already mentioned, it's a very limited staffing model. It's 2.8 FTEs to continue focusing on EOC. By the way, one of the staff members in this team has been stewarding all of our grant administration, things like the CARES Act funding. This team will do parks facility scheduling, specifically athletic fields, and then start working on the recreation recovery plan. We are actually able to use CARES Act funds to do the recovery planning work, and that's how we intend to get started on that this year. The community center budget, and we put the snapshot there below, does include some fixed operating costs for the building. It's not full capacity as if we were open Monday to Sunday, but some of the fixed costs for the building are included in the budget. And what I should remind you is the building is being used. So we have one of our maintenance teams operating out of that facility, and in the near term, we'll be using, I assume, the main floor to help with donations processing for the thrift shop. So those operations are factored in. Okay, the next slide. So as we start to talk about what to do, how we plan financially for next year, some things to remember, and I shared this slide with you last week. In 2019, the city subsidized the recreation and arts programs by about $600,000 a year. So that's in 2019, when we were operating at full capacity. Our reopening plan needs to factor in a one-time startup with recreation programs. In particular, we need some advanced staff on board to get planning and bring those programs back online, and likely will also require an ongoing subsidy. Certainly, council, we don't have the resources to subsidize at the levels we were previously. That's something we need to discuss. The community center, which is budgeted separately, in 2019 was subsidized by almost $800,000 that year. Again, we don't have the means to maintain the combined programming and community center subsidy that we had previously. That's why this recovery plan is so very critical to us. It's not just looking at how we come back, it's how we come back wisely. It's our business plan, it's our policies, lots of work to do. So these are my questions for you this evening, and I am going to stop here because I would like to discuss. We did not include yet in your budget proposal list the one-time startup costs and/or an ongoing subsidy for these services. And council, I'd like to get some direction from you tonight as to what number you'd like included. And I know that's a bit of a dartboard exercise, but I'd like your feedback before we get there. So again, what should our ongoing subsidy be in 21 and 22? And again, I'm looking for a placeholder because we have more work to do, but I think it's important to set aside those funds when we get to the budget proposal exercise. So, and we do, and I'll ask Jason to pop back in here now. This is again a tricky conversation. What I've said so far is by June, I would like to have our summer camps back online at the community center. I think that's a good starting place. Certainly childcare is a pretty considerable need in our community right now. And our summer camp programs cost recover, and then some make more than that. So that's my goal. If we can bring services back and have a decent cost recovery sooner, we may consider that. But some things to remember, our bread and butter in terms of facility rentals was things like weddings and private parties in the Mercer room on the weekend, and those are heavily restricted right now. So there's lots of factors. What Jason and I had initially considered is something around a $300,000 to $400,000 one-time startup cost in the 2021 budget as a placeholder for now, and probably at least that much of a subsidy in 2022. So that's my initial recommendation, but I welcome your feedback tonight on this recommendation. And again, this goes to November 2nd, and I'll be adding it to your budget proposal list, so you've got it to compare against all your other demands.
Dave, your hand was up first.
Thanks. Jesse, just to clarify a little bit, so when you talk about these one-time startup costs and then sort of what you expect the subsidies would be, I understand those are probably separate issues, right?
That's correct.
So my question is, okay, so, you know, if we take the one-time funding, use that for one-time funding, and then, you know, subsidies over these 2 years, does that encompass all of the costs in terms of personnel, or are there additional personnel costs that are then ongoing after that?
I'm not sure I'm following your question. So we need.
So
go.
Let me try again. So
that's okay. This is tough.
So if the subsidy, I guess my question is, what is included in that subsidy, or are there additional personnel costs that are not part of what you're sort of considering to be that subsidy?
This is where it gets tricky. I don't know what's included in that subsidy yet because we haven't developed the recovery plan, and I need to bring that back to you with a suite of programs and services and policies that says, council, we're proposing to bring the community center and recreation programs back in this fashion, in this order. You know, I'm projecting we will need approximately this subsidy for the next 2 years. What I'm looking for, Councilmember Rosenbaum, is a placeholder so that we set aside some of our ongoing, general fund surplus and our one-time surplus for this purpose, knowing that we still have work ahead of us. So the one-time startup is to get us going again, to hire staff while we're not making any revenue. And then yes, there's an additional subsidy, ongoing subsidy that's part of that. And it's been close to 1.4 million annually in prior years.
I mean, I think it'd be helpful, to have a better sense of that, $300,000, $400,000, what that sort of buys, for lack of a better word. Just so we can kind of understand, like, what's the actual minimum, and then sort of what is the suite of services beyond that?
So full-time staff, it buys anywhere from 3 to 4 full-time staff, coordinator to mid-manager level. To bring back summer camps, I need at least 1 full-time staff, just to give you perspective. We're not even into community center operations yet, where we need seasonal staff and front desk staff and things like that. Now remember, these are revenue generating programs, right? So there's a revenue component that's not available in, with some of our other city operations.
Yeah, I mean, that was my next question. You know, would it make more sense, or would it make some sense to prioritize the revenue generating programs in terms of a restart over the other ones? But obviously we don't know what the capacity is going to be for summer camp, for example. I mean, are we going to have, 1,000 kids at camp, or are we going to be where we were last summer?
Yeah. And again, remember, we don't have a recovery plan presented to you yet, right? So all of these are things that we need to talk about as we work on these, really critical issues. And yes, I will be strongly encouraging you to prioritize revenue generating and high cost recovery programs as we get restarted. We just don't have the resources to subsidize otherwise.
Okay.
Jake.
It would be easier for me to respond to your direction on the subject if you were to price by the program, what the program is, what the cost of starting it up and running it would be, and what the revenue is. Mm-hmm. And a line item kind of approach, and I think that's what Dave was somewhat suggesting. Yeah. And that would make it easier for me to say 1, 2, 5, and 6 make good sense to me, mm-hmm. and that adds up to some kind of a number that's driven by, personnel and other kinds of considerations. And because I think that restarting a number of our recreational programs is really important to the community, mm-hmm. and I'm very supportive of that. Subject to me, figure out what it is we're doing.
So City Council, we have a sequencing problem, and what you're asking for, Councilmember Jacobson, what Councilmember Rosenbaum was asking for is absolutely intended to be included in our recovery planning work. It is not ready to go yet, unfortunately. So what we're faced with is, as that work begins, I won't be back in front of you until the first part of 2021 with a proposal similar, very similar actually, to what Councilmember Jacobson just described. So what I'm asking and reminding is we need to set aside some resources for that division in 21-22. We can't meet where we were in 2019. We don't have $1.4 million to subsidize that operation. So we're essentially looking for a placeholder so that we've got resources set aside for the next biennium to recover that division, knowing that your planning work and the very specific programs, policies, services is still under development and won't be ready to go in time for your budget adoption.
Was it possible to say that for $400,000, this is the bag of stuff you're looking at?
Not without a considerable amount of effort, and I'm not sure I could pull it off, to be honest with you, by November 2nd. That's why we.
Well, I understand that, but
yeah.
I think just to chime in here, I think it's we know there's going to be something that's needed to start services again. We don't know exactly we don't know the makeup of what it's going to be quite yet. So I think there's an interest, and there's definitely an interest to restart these services next year, as ideally as quickly as possible, right? If we could have done it by now, we would have.
Right.
We have to be very strategic and careful about what that looks like. And the programs and services that we offer are going to be different than what they were pre-COVID. I think we just have to take our time and do our due diligence to figure out what exactly that's going to be.
Craig.
Yeah, thank you. Very helpful. I'll just second what's been said by the last two speakers, that I think we need to get there sooner or later. I recognize, Jesse, it's complicated and will take some time. I'm going to suggest a reframe, though, of the discussion a little bit. I understand the usefulness of talking about subsidies for these functions, and I think I understand it loosely to mean the excess of what it costs to operate them over the revenue they generate. But I think when we use that terminology, we're treating those as if they were businesses that were intended to be profitable, that we have to keep them from going bankrupt. And we don't talk about how much our subsidy is for the fire department or the city attorney or community planning and development. These are just city services that the city provides. And those city services provide value to our community members. And I think it's important to recognize that it's a shortfall that we'd like them to it's a budget pot we have to fill, but it's really no different than a budget pot we have to fill for any other department. And I'm really nervous about the use of the term subsidy because it seems to imply that somehow they're not pulling their weight. And I don't like to look at it that way. That's just a comment I want to make.
Right.
Thank you.
And while I agree with that comment, I will mention there's a key difference with the Recreation Division in that it is a revenue generating department. And so we do use the word subsidy to identify the gap between the revenues we bring in and our expenditures. And I also believe, as a former Parks and Recreation Director, that it's an essential service that we provide.
Salim.
So I know, because I have a 5-year-old who's super active, that these programs are some of the most important on the island. I know you're looking for direction, and I would be supportive of taking the top range of the number, the 400 per year, and allocating it for the restoration of the recreational programs. I know that from a risk perspective, those stand the best opportunity to persist, even if there are additional shutdowns, because they can be done outdoors, and we know that those can be done most likely socially distanced and could be probably done safely. I don't know if there's a way to, I think about startup costs, and I think about this term that we've been using, the subsidy. I do think that it would be nice to buy down the cost of the programs in the beginning in the ramp so that people are not spending the same amount of money they were accustomed to before for a summer program for the new whack, right? I mean, it may be a program that is less appealing because it has less things going on. It may be that people have less available money to put their kids in these programs, but they desperately need them. So I would like to see some sort of cost subsidization of the price of the program, if there are a way to do that. But I think that if we threw the 400 at it, that there would be a way to implement some programs, hopefully at a lower cost than we've done in the past, and then just see what we come out with on the backside. So I'd be supportive of that.
Dave. No? Craig? Nothing. Okay. Guys, leave your hands up. I'll just add that I'm supportive of trying to figure out how to bring our Parks and Rec back as soon as possible. So thank you for starting here, and let's put that placeholder there to figure out how to address this subsidy.
All right, so here's what we'll do, Council. I know I left you with a wide open discussion item, and that's tricky with 6 different opinions this evening. We will include on November 2nd a recommendation in terms of one-time startup and what we think the operating costs might look like then in 21 and 22 in addition. Councilmember Neese raised a great point. You have policies on the books today that say we do not cost recover for programs for senior adults, for youth, and we need to revisit that as part of your recovery plan. So that's an excellent segue. Alternatively, programs for adults, typically per our policy, are expected to fully cost recover. So as we build our recovery plan, we'll be looking at those operating policies, and you, in fact, will be approving them. We also intend to engage the Parks and Recreation Commission in formulating this recovery plan. So Council, what I owe you at this point is coming back on November 2nd. Jason Kittner and I and some of the staff members will work on, let's just call it a loose pro forma, so you know what, we've got some placeholders to go forward, and then we're already starting work on our recovery plan. Does that sound okay?
It does, and one thing I might say is if you could even quantify it by how many kids or people the programs might touch, that would be maybe an easy way to get head around the scale of what we're talking about.
I will do my best.
Jesse, just to clarify, did you get enough direction from us tonight in terms of?
Well, I'm getting some resistance to putting a number out there. I'm going to go ahead and run with what Councilmember Neese says and plug in the $400,000 startup placeholder for 2021 and likely an additional allocation in 2022. And then we can pick up the discussion on November 2nd, because I think you've also got to see it in context with all of the other budget proposals.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that you can, just to help us really understand what does that sort of get us in terms of like the absolute floor versus ceiling kind of perspective.
Yeah, and I'm going to continue to say this is tough. This actually is a business I know forward and backwards, and I appreciate the need for detail. It's also just really tough to get at it right now.
No, I appreciate that, and obviously given, I mean, there's so much uncertainty what the next, 6 to 12 months look like. Totally understand that. I just want to be in a position where, at this point next year, we kind of said, oh, I wish we had done X, Y, and Z, and, kind of missed opportunities, to both provide services, but also, revenue as well.
One thing I will say is, and we can probably build this out a little bit more. It's my intention to recommend that youth programs come back first. Councilmember Neese was alluding to that. So, let Jason and I do some work on at least our general approach, so that we can give you the framework of where we're headed, knowing that you still have additional decisions ahead of you.
Great.
Craig.
Yeah, just a question. I apologize if I should know this, or you said it already this evening, but when you have these revenue generating programs, are they, do off-islanders pay a different rate than islanders?
It depends on our policy, but yes. So facility rental rates are different. Mm-hmm.
Do you generally strive for full cost recovery from off-islanders?
We have not.
Okay. It seems like a policy discussion that perhaps we should have as part of this, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Jake?
I'm good with a $400,000 plug at this point, and I fully appreciate, Jesse, all the balls you have in the air. So I'd be good with that, and move on, and we'll figure out just what it covers and what we want to prioritize after, in Q1 of 21.
Yeah. And Councilmember Reynolds, just to get back to your question, your comment is excellent. It's something that we've certainly gone back and forth on over the years. Our programs most of them don't cost recover, so that's something that we could look at through our fee structure.
And it seems like there's an accounting / philosophy discussion. We talk about marginal cost recovery versus fully allocated cost recovery, but it seems like it should at least be covering the marginal cost when off-islanders are using the programs, and hopefully somewhere towards full allocated cost.
And I should say, when I throw out the word cost recovery for the Recreation Division, I'm usually looking at direct costs. I'm not looking at full overhead city cost recovery. So just to be clear, I think that's what you were referencing there as well.
Yeah.
I will say this. This has been, the closure of the community center has been one of the hardest things to happen, but we're really excited about the work. And there's a silver lining here, right? We get to build back, do some of the work that we started to do before the pandemic, the business planning, really strategic about how we recover this division, in an efficient and effective way. So we're excited about it. I think the Parks and Rec Commission is excited to get going too.
So is there a go, no-go if this pandemic stretches out into Q2 of 2021, for example? Is there a point at which we can't bring services back that we'll know?
Well, I was going to say no, but, I don't know. Based on where we are today, Deputy Mayor Weicker, I feel confident that we can bring summer camps back. Some summer camps were operating this past summer. We did not have the capacity to pick the programming back up. So I think there will be a way. Certainly if things change with the pandemic, then I'll eat my words. But it means there will be some trade-offs, right? If the community center is running for summer camp programs at that time, it likely won't be running for drop-in, and it won't be running for other things. So those are decisions we have to make. The facility space, based on how we know the pandemic these days, can't be shared in the way that it was previously. So that's all got to be factored in. But summer programs is great because we can go outside, barring any wildfire smoke. So we have a little more flexibility in the summer.
Amen.
All right. I will note it's 9 o'clock. We haven't taken a break. We have one more department to go through before we flip to the CIP. Should I keep going? Do you want to stop here for 10 minutes?
I'm good to keep going.
All right. All right. How about one more department, and then I'll check back in with you. Okay. Some equally challenging questions for you here. Youth and Family Services Department, which is a separate fund. Just a reminder, some work plan, key themes for the YFS department this year, long-term funding strategy for human services, including our school counselors. That has been a topic of discussion even since prior to the pandemic. Continuing to focus on providing access to mental health for all of Mercer Island School District students. YFS is providing pretty critical emergency assistance right now to families on Mercer Island and geriatric case management. And a top priority of the work plan is resuming thrift shop operations and managing special projects, particularly if the thrift shop remodel project goes forward. YFS has one budget proposal and some other items I need to talk to you about, so I'll keep going. The budget proposal is specific to diversity, equity, inclusion training for YFS staff. It's a $5,000 ongoing annual expense. I do have a couple more slides, so we can come back to this budget proposal in just a moment. I've been asked a couple times, what does it look like to restore the furloughed YFS positions for the biennium? So all of our school counselors and a handful of other staff are still furloughed. To restore them fully, it's about a 1.7 FTE increase. What that translates to in terms of dollars is about $128,000 in 2021 and $130,000 in 2022. The thrift shop leadership positions, and remember, council, we laid off all of the thrift shop staff except for two. The two staff we still have working are furloughed at half-time, although that is likely not sustainable for much longer, considering that we're ramping up operations. So restoring those positions to full-time is a full 1 FTE increase. It's about $100,000 over each year. Now remember, we are starting to, this service is starting to recover slowly. We will need additional contract or seasonal positions to sustain the operation, in addition to the volunteers that we just talked about. The way I see this working as we go forward is that we'll be coming back to you with budget amendments to cover these increased expenditure needs associated with also hopefully increased revenues. So some things to keep in mind. November 2nd, we'll be talking about the thrift shop remodel, including the timing and the timing for completion if the project is supported. We will likely need some one-time startup capital to reopen, particularly if we swing, widely from where we are today. We're at 1 day of thrift shop operations. If in the next 2 months we go to 5-day operations, for example, we will need some startup capital. Okay, this is where it gets a little tricky. The general fund subsidy right now included in your budget calls for $103,000 from the general fund in 2021 and almost $900,000 in 2022. Why is that? Your budget was prepared with a very conservative, I've said this before, very conservative revenue assumption for the thrift shop. We basically held the $310,000 revenue assumption across 21 and 22. And I've heard a lot of people say, Jesse, that's just way too low. So council, what I wanted to get some feedback from you tonight, and I agree, it's probably too low, but we can do this one of two ways. Would you like to modify the thrift shop operation projections or the assumptions as part of this budget process. So would you like to go ahead and consider increasing the revenue, which will then also necessitate increasing the expenditures? We can do that now. The advantage is that you free up some of that one-time money that I just showed you, right? That the $900,000 I've got to take from your one-time money to balance the budget. So if we increase our assumptions, you have less of a need for one-time money. Now, if we do it that way, though, we're doing some guessing about where we'll be. Maybe that's okay. As an alternative, you can keep the budget the way it is now, recognizing it's very conservative. We certainly expect to do better than what I've proposed, but we can do this in an incremental process where I come back to you quarterly with budget amendments. So we're tracking our progress and the council is directly involved in allocating funds as we go. That's a little more time intensive for the staff, I will admit, but it certainly keeps you very engaged in the process. So we're open to either approach. We did want to have a discussion with you. This is a pandemic and there's no playbook for how we do this. So I will stop there and would love to get your feedback on the budget approach to the YFS fund. I hope that made sense.
Dave.
For option 3 there, obviously it's more work for staff, but does it allow us to be nimble enough in terms of hirings? I mean, if you have to come to us and, if we're weeks behind where you think we should be in terms of getting staff in the door, are we potentially losing revenue there? Is that a concern? Not really.
Well, that assumes things are moving really fast, and at this point, we're not moving that fast. We're moving very at a measured pace and cautiously. So I anticipate, knowing that we have 2 council meetings a month, that we would be able to get in front of you with a budget amendment. But it does require staff time, right? We've got to put together the budget proposal and come back to you versus just authorizing the city manager to make those decisions as recovery progresses.
Craig.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, Jesse, that you quoted a number for the thrift shop or the YFS leadership position. I think it was $195,000. I can't recall if that was the per year or the total across the biennium. What was it?
It's about $100,000 a year just to restore the 2 full-time, the 2 thrift shop staff we still have on payroll to full-time. That does not account for any of the other thrift shop staff we'll need to recover our operations.
I thought there was another figure for YFS leadership, the former City Goodwin's position, or maybe that was something else that you were talking about there.
I see Ally.
Yeah, it's not specific to a leadership position. It's all currently furloughed YFS positions, so school counselors and then a few others.
Okay, so there was 1.69 FTE for the school counselors, if I recall correctly.
And other positions, so our emergency assistance position, I have to think of the other ones, but it's that's the increase for that staff.
Maybe you could go back to that slide for just a second, if you could.
Yeah.
Okay, so thrift shop leadership positions. Okay, so that's different. That's not the YFS leadership or anything like that, right? So there's no budget proposal for restoring a director of YFS that intended to continue to be Ally's bailiwick.
That's correct.
Okay, and the furloughed positions, just to make sure I have the terminology correct, that's referring to the fact that these are basically 32-hour-a-week positions, and that would get them back up to 40 or something approximating that. Is that correct?
Yes, essentially for the school year, for the school counselors, yes.
For the school year, so that's the school counselors. And what about the senior services, the geriatric counselors? Where do they end up at relative to where they were in this proposal?
The geriatric specialist is still a half-time position.
And was it half-time before COVID or?
Yes. In 2018, it was reduced to half-time. And then the foundation provided funds to bring it back up to full-time. And so another staff person took on some of that case management. But as it is right now, that's a half-time position, so 0.5 FTE for senior case management.
Okay, thank you.
Salim.
So to answer the question, as I think I heard it, I would prefer the conservative model with the more frequent touch points back to council if the ramp ends up being other than what the conservative model holds.
So Salim, do you recommend holding the budget where it is right now, reflecting $300,000 in revenue and some basic fixed costs for the thrift shop in 21, 22? And then that means, I just want to confirm that's the number as it's presented right now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that feels right. It's going to be a throwing dart exercise anyway, but I think that if we start low and we build on it, we know that volunteers are going to be an important part of the ramp up. That might have to shift towards staff at some point. So I just think being nimble and conservative is the way to go on that.
Mm-hmm. And Lisa?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's hard to be able to pick a number that's higher than that. At this point, that seems reasonable.
Jake.
I concur with Salim and Lisa.
So similar, I'm seeing thumbs up, similar to the Recreation Transition Team Council, we'll be, we're working on this now. I'd anticipate being in touch with you pretty quickly in Q1 based on our experiences at the end of 2020 and starting to modify operations. And what that means then is we will have to set aside one-time funds to balance the budget. And so we'll reflect that in your budget proposals on November 2nd. Everyone's tired, need a coffee or a chocolate, huh? Okay, we are now on to the CIP presentation. We can keep going, or we can take a break for 5 minutes. Is there a preference?
5-minute break.
All right. 9:15, that's a little more than 5 minutes. Does that work? 9:15, thank you.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Weicker, we are live.
Welcome back, everybody.
All right. I think we've got people coming back online here, so we are going to pick up now with the CIP portion of our presentation. And both Matt Mornick and Jason Kittner are online, as well as some other staff, and they will be driving the slideshow here. So let me hang tight, Matt. All right.
Well, good evening, Council. Matt Mornick, your Interim Finance Director. Jesse, we can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to walk through about 15 slides to provide you with a general overview of the capital improvement program, the financing strategy that supports the program, the utility rate changes as reviewed by the utility board for the upcoming biennium, and then Jason Kittner, my colleague, will provide some highlights on capital projects. The department directors and I are happy to answer questions as we go through this material. Next slide. So the capital program is a 6-year plan to acquire, expand, and rehabilitate land, buildings, and other public infrastructure. So the program spans 6 years, but it is only in the first 2 years where funds are approved and appropriated. We include fiscal year 2023 and 2026 as a planning tool. As part of the effort to improve the capital program, we added new thresholds for capital projects this year. So we focused on projects that are more than $50,000 with a minimum useful life of at least 3 years. This allowed staff to focus limited capital budget on the city's highest priority projects. And in June, the council reviewed and approved the state mandated transportation improvement program, which includes the city's transportation related capital projects. So all TIP projects are included in this proposed CIP. Next slide. Okay, so what is different this year? Well, we revived the CIP committee, and which allows us to pull from the strengths of various directors, as well as get their input on what kind of projects we wanted to propose to council for the upcoming biennium. Although the kinds of projects within the capital program vary greatly, we also created a standard measure for project managers to rank project applications. So this helped project managers submitting applications to think critically about the long-term value of each project. And it also served as a consideration among many on the committee that used to evaluate the projects that were proposed for the city council this evening. So overall, this preliminary capital improvement program represents a tangible work plan to address the city's most pressing capital needs. So by focusing on less projects, we are more likely to accomplish more. Next slide, please. We basically covered that. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. Thank you. So for the upcoming biennium, staff proposes $16.1 million in 2021 and $21.8 million in projects in 2022. Next slide, please. Oh, Jesse, I apologize if you won't mind going back. I just want to note that we are proposing 74 total projects, which is notably less than what we proposed in 2019 and 2020. Next slide. Per state law, we distinguish between projects that maintain existing infrastructure versus projects that add new infrastructure, which are classified as capital facilities related projects. So the city is obligated, first and foremost, to maintain existing infrastructure. So that's where we put most of our focus, and you can see nearly all of the capital dollars focus on reinvestment. Staff ensures that new projects that we propose as part of the capital facilities plan can be successfully maintained as part of the city's infrastructure. So I'm happy to pause briefly to see if there's any questions on the material we've covered so far.
Nope.
Okay,
Keep going.
no questions, so let's keep going. Great, next slide, please. The city's capital financing strategy has been to use restricted revenues on a pay-as-you-go basis. The idea being revenues received now pay for capital investments now, which means that the capital program relies on existing fund balances, and that utility rate changes year to year pay for capital investments in those respective years. It's important to note the city's capital program includes the cost of staff time associated with each project. That varies across cities, but it's a best practice to make sure that staff time committed to capital projects is captured within the capital budget, and that is a longstanding practice here in the city. Next slide, please. Going back to fiscal year 2015, this chart is pulled from your preliminary budget document, and it provides a high-level perspective of actual versus budgeted expenditures in the capital improvement program with the budgeted amounts in 2021 and 2022. Next slide. On the revenue side, this chart illustrates the resources from respective funds that are paying for the proposed projects in the upcoming biennium, which total nearly $38 million. And I'm just going to keep going because we're going to dive into the capital funds on the next slide. Within the city's 19 distinct funds, 7 are designed to support the capital improvement program. So this chart outlines the kinds of revenues associated with each fund and the kinds of projects that they support. It's important to note that many of these resources come with external restrictions, which is part of the conversation we had last week, that's fund accounting. The general fund is the primary and only revenue source for technology and equipment related capital projects. Utility rates can only be used within the respective utility, which is just part of the fund accounting rules. And fuel taxes can only be used for street and trail projects. One of the key revenue streams in the capital program, REIT, the real estate excise tax, is one of the largest funding sources, and it comes with very specific restrictions. Next slide, please. So at a high level, this pro forma conveys how each of the 7 fund balances change over the coming biennium, taking into account the proposed revenues less the proposed expenditures. So per the pay-as-you-go philosophy that guides the capital program, fund balances fluctuate depending upon project activity supported by each fund. So when we have a lot of active projects, fund balances are going to decrease. When there is less capital program activity, fund balances increase for future use. It's also worth noting that this chart does not reflect the state Supreme Court's recent decision regarding the unconstitutionality of Initiative 976. I will speak to that shortly, but note we will update the street fund in the preliminary budget before the City Council adopts the budget this coming December. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm gonna walk through the real estate excise tax. This is the 0.5% tax paid by sellers in property transactions. As I mentioned, this is the largest revenue source for projects supported by the street and capital improvement funds. State law restricts how we use REIT. The first half can be committed to streets, parks, utilities, and public facility capital improvements. The second portion of REIT, known as REIT 2, can support streets, parks, and utilities, but not facilities. A portion of this also can be used for affordable housing. We cannot use REIT dollars to purchase vehicles, equipment, or technology, but we can use some REIT for maintenance. Next slide. Okay, Initiative 976 passed in November of 2019, and the measure was designed to eliminate the authority of governments to impose taxes and fees on vehicles and limit car tabs to $30. The state Supreme Court found that the initiative violates the state constitution, and that decision came out on October 15th. And as it stands, the decision appears to be final with respect to the invalidity of the initiative. And so this is going to restore roughly $410,000 in transportation benefit district revenues, as well as state multimodal revenues to the city. We have accounted for these and collected these funds as a liability, but now that the decision has come through, we can now account for them as a revenue within the street fund, and we will do so before the final budget is before you. So I'm happy to pause for any questions.
I don't see any, Matt.
Okay.
All right. Oh, whoops.
Great. Okay. So the utility rate update with several major utility projects coming online in 21 and fiscal year 22, and with the last rate study having been completed in 2010, staff engaged the FCS group to conduct a rate study for water, sewer, and the stormwater utilities. The resulting proposed rate plan balances the financial needs of each of the utilities over the next 2 years while minimizing the year-to-year impacts to customers. It also reaches the target reinvestment funding goals within the city's budget policies for each of the utilities while addressing the capital needs that we've laid out in the capital improvement program. Next slide. So this is a multi-year rate plan. We took into account the cost to operate each utility, the debt service that we currently have in place, and the capital costs as outlined within the capital program. And given the breadth of the major capital investments in this coming biennium, we are going to recommend debt financing on certain projects. And per the city's budget policies, this can only take place when projects are greater than $2 million. The project will benefit not only current, but also future ratepayers, and the bond money can be spent within the 3 years of issuance. So we're recommending $6 million in bonds be issued in 2022 to finance 3 of the major projects in the utility funds: the SCADA system improvement, the booster chlorination station, and the meter replacement implementation, which Jason will talk about shortly. Issuing debt for these new facilities ensures that they will be paid for over time and by all the ratepayers that will benefit from them. Next slide. So for fiscal year 2021 and 22, we propose a 5.25% increase per year to the water rate, a 4% increase per year to the sewer rate, and a 5.5% increase per year to the stormwater rate. This translates to monthly increases as outlined in the table, and this recommendation was unanimously approved by the utility board this month. Happy to pause for questions.
And just a reminder, these rates come back for council approval on November 17th?
Yes, thank you, Jesse.
Craig.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm having trouble unmuting. Just going back to the $6 million, I think it was, of debt that you're talking about, do we require voter approval for that?
No, this would be councilmanic debt.
Second question, this might be a question for Jason more than you, but I'll trust you guys to tell me that. To what extent, what commentary do we have on remaining useful life on the water and sewer systems, and when would it be appropriate to start planning for a more wholesale upgrade or replacement of those systems?
Councilmember Reynolds, we're losing your audio, so we didn't catch that question. Would you mind repeating, please?
Sure. To what extent have we looked at the useful life remaining of the water and sewer systems, and we believe that when is it time to start planning for a more wholesale upgrade or replacement of the piping?
I can take it, Jesse. I got the gist of it, and I was actually going to talk about this on the next couple slides. So, Councilmember Reynolds, for the utilities, each utility, the water, the sewer, and the stormwater utility, have essentially a master plan or a system plan that's been completed for each utility that sort of guides our reinvestment and our O&M side of the house for the utilities. The city, the most recent plan that was adopted by the council in 2018 was the general sewer plan. That was an update from a 2003 plan. The water system plan was updated in 2015. That gets updated every 5 years. And that's scheduled in the next biennium to come back to the council, as well as the comprehensive stormwater plan, which was completed in 2006. So, there are a number of needs within our utilities and our infrastructure. There's no denying that. I will say this capital program that you see in front of you this year is maybe different from years previously. And what I say by that is it's probably a more diverse capital reinvestment strategy. It's no longer, like, for example, on the water system side, there's not a ton of substandard water main replacement. It's been brought into our water reservoir improvement projects, our SCADA projects, some of the other areas within our utility infrastructure that has critical risk that needs to be addressed, and we're focusing our efforts on those projects first and foremost. I think it's, when we come back to you at the water system update the next biennium, I think it's certainly worth a conversation about the long-term projected health for the systems and whether or not a different approach needs to be made. But I think we are being strategic and we're guided in our decisions and recommendations for the CIP projects that we move forward in the biennium.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm happy to hand it over to Jason now, where he's just going to walk through a couple of the key highlights within the capital improvement program as proposed to the council. We're happy to answer any questions that the council has regarding any of the projects or the financing strategy that's being proposed.
So good evening. I will just go through the projects at a high level. Each project that's in the biennium is in the budget book with specifics on it. So I think it's probably just due to the time of the evening. We'll go through these fairly quickly and then take questions at the end. So as Matt mentioned before, the capital projects have different categories. The buildings, the vehicles and technology feed the general government. Parks and Recreation, our streets, ped and bicycle facilities, which obviously the council reviews via the TIP process, and then obviously our utilities. So go ahead, next slide. So our general government, our public buildings, these major projects, I don't really consider them major projects in all reality. This is our carpet replacement. This is our minor modifications that we do to our buildings, including the Public Works Building, the Community Center, the Luther Burbank Admin Building. An important note with this is that, as I mentioned earlier in the evening, the buildings are coming back into the Public Works Department. And I think it's really important. Our HVAC systems within our buildings are a little bit of an unknown in terms of their remaining useful life left. And so one of the projects proposed for the buildings is to perform a baseline assessment of our HVAC systems so that we can see our future needs. I will say they're very expensive and costly, the modifications that are made. And so that baseline assessment is needed to evaluate, where we spend our money in the future. So that is included in the public buildings. Go ahead to the next slide. Vehicles and equipment, we've talked about our fleet replacements already. I know there was an email. The agenda bill is updated with the information. As council knows, we completed a fleet audit in 2015. Our typical replacement cycle for vehicles, non-patrol vehicles, moved from an 8-year cycle to a 10-year cycle. And our patrol vehicles for police moved from a 3 to a 4-year cycle. Due to the COVID pandemic and other considerations in evaluating our fleet, 14 of those vehicles that were identified for replacement actually extended their useful life during this budget cycle. So our replacement numbers are significantly down in terms of comparison to previous years. I'll also note that depending on how the council budget discussions progress and our future seasonal and casual labor needs within our staffing model, once the budget process is completed, we will evaluate whether or not we have additional vehicles that need to be surplused or whether they should be retained for use. So I'll put that as an asterisk of things that we will complete following the budget process. Go to the next slide. Our technology capital work, as you see here, you've heard Matt talk about our financial management software project and our permitting system upgrades. Our mobile asset data collection is important to our GIS network, which feeds all of our operating systems for community development and planning, as well as public works. The Esri platform and GIS platform is essential to our day-to-day operations. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Parks and Recreation. Again, you see our major projects as our open space management. I will say that when talking about open space management, we are focusing on maintaining status quo. This isn't an improvement or expansion of our open space program, but it's maintaining what we have and not going backwards with our open space and natural resource area. You also see the Arbor Davis Park Trail safety improvements. The council went through an extensive Arbor Davis Park master plan process last year, and you'll see us start implementing some of those proposed safety improvements in the next biennium. Also within parks, again, it's important to note that we have a number of degrading dock facilities, in particular at Luther Burbank Park. We've had some public engagement processes have begun for that facility. And so you see some capital reinvestment needs identified for that Luther Burbank Park shoreline restoration. In terms of Parks and Recreation, I'll put 2 asterisks on the table for council. Project PA0135, which Jesse, what I believe is E67 in your budget book.
E69.
69, thank you.
Page E69.
Page E69 is the Park Access Control and Monitoring Phase 1. Council will recall that at one of the other city manager reports, we have been moving forward with a building access code project, and we were able to piggyback off of that project to get our park restrooms tied to that project. So our park restrooms will actually be part of that access control system. So we will update this project for the final budget book, but I need to bring that to the council's attention.
So Jason, I just want to clarify. So project E69 was funded in 2020. That funding is no longer needed.
It was funded in 2021 and it's no longer needed, correct?
I guess what I was saying is we're funded the project, like it's being done right now. So the money that's on this budget proposal is not needed.
Correct.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarification. The other piece that I want to bring to the council's attention that's not in here is a project that has been a little bit forgotten, but it'll definitely come to everyone's forefront and as soon as the rains return, and that is the Mercerdale Park playground project. So recall that playground flooded last year due to an aging stormwater system, the compaction of the 5R, and that playground has reached the end of its useful life and it needs to be replaced. And so we need to come up with a replacement strategy for it, and it's something that staff will be looking at and bringing back to the council for consideration. So I just want to bring those 2 projects to the council's attention to be aware of as we go through the capital program. Go ahead to the next slide. Our streets, peds, and bikes, again, we go through the TIP process. The projects identified here mimic what was proposed in the TIP. As Matt talked about, the street fund and then the TBD now are the primary funding sources for these projects. Go ahead to the next slide. On the sewer utility, one of my favorites. We have talked about the SCADA project, our supervisory control and data acquisition system at length. It is in design now, and it will be moving forward in the next biennium. So this is one of the projects that we have identified for debt funding. I think it's important to note that the project is going to be split between the 2 utilities. So the water system will likely go first in early 2021, and the sewer system will come, the sewer system upgrade will come later, likely in 2022. There's some different nuances associated with each side of the house. In particular, on the sewer side, we have 17 pump stations that we have to control our access to and from. And so it's a little bit more of a complicated design work than the water side. So council will be seeing the water side in early 2021 with an authorization to bid. And then the other two projects on the sewer fund, again, the comprehensive pipeline R&R. So this speaks to Councilmember Reynolds' question about the remaining useful life of our system. The general sewer plan identified upgrades necessary within the sewer utility. There are different ways we can go about extending the useful life. One of those is to do lining of our sewer system rather than a full pipe replacement. And so this program is specific to targeting those areas, to extending the useful life of the sewer system without having to actually replace the pipe. You can actually do a cast in place, pour in place lining of the pipe system that actually extends it. And then our sewer system generator replacement projects. This is important to our pump stations. As I said, there's 17 pump stations. We are required to have backup power to these pump stations. When the power goes out, it is often hard to get to these locations at times until the trees and debris is cleared. And it's important that they run on backup fuel to keep our sewage moving off the island and not into people's homes. So important project there. Next slide. On the stormwater side, we've talked about this for years as well. We did a lot of our large comprehensive basin projects early following the conclusion of the comprehensive plan. We are now working on our small to medium-sized basins or medium to small basins. Council will recall that a lot of this work requires multiple permits from different agencies, including the Army Corps of Engineers. So the way this capital reinvestment program is designed on the basin projects is to go through a design in year 1 and construction in year 2. Most of the time we've gotten our schedule identified where this lines up pretty nicely with the permitting agencies. And so those basin stabilization projects are important, but they do take some additional time and design and planning and permitting to get through. Next slide, please. And then on the water utility side, we've talked about the meter replacement program. This was scheduled to be completed this year. Unfortunately, due to the COVID pandemic, as well as some pretty significant staff turnover, this project was delayed. We are working on getting a contract in place with implementation to begin in 2021. The booster chlorination station project we've talked about as well. Again, this is wrapping up into the final stages of design and we'll go into construction next year. And then the last piece, we've already talked about SCADA. The last project I'll draw the council's attention to is the reservoir improvement projects. We have 2 4 million gallon reservoirs, tanks at Rotary Park, or just outside Rotary Park. The last lining of those tanks was done in 1999 and 2000. They have an expected useful life of 20 years. And so we are now up to reline those reservoir tanks. You have to do one at a time. And so you see that spread across the CIP for upcoming work to be done at that facility. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I would say the types of projects broadened. They're not just pipe replacement projects, and that's indicative of the utility plans that we have in place and recommendations for reinvestment. Next slide. I think this is your slide, Jesse.
Absolutely, and this will be a good time to break and talk about questions council you have on CIP projects, CIP funding. We did not torture you going project by project, but you may have some specific questions, and we're happy to answer.
Craig, your hand is still up. No? Anybody? Okay, I have one. So Jason, in a couple of these projects, it shows HVAC and LED upgrades. Can we ping PSC for some energy efficiency money or some partnership thing? We did something with the school district a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That's we actually do that with some of our light retrofits for our town center lights or our street lights as well. So that's something that we will look at for sure.
Amen. Nothing? Going once. Salim, go.
As long as we're shopping for it. So what I would say, Jason, well, maybe we have everybody on the call, right? So Ed is on the call, right? So what I wanted to discuss was, last time when we were talking budget, we talked about bringing on the 2 additional patrol officers for the town center kind of focus in 2022. And so those resources, as they roll out of the academy, would be focused on the new transit interchange and being able to be supportive of that in the town center. And then we talked about the former Tully site being an anchor, a possible anchor as a MIPD kind of micro precinct or town center precinct that would support the community policing kind of nature of having those single officers, but on a 7-day-a-week shift, servicing the town center in that area. So to the extent that there's 50,000 available from PAO 135, I would propose that we move that to 2022 to facilitate standing up a micro precinct or town center precinct to be an anchor for those 2 patrol officers, assuming we move forward with that.
Did the council members, is everyone tracking that recommendation?
And so I'm thinking it's a very light appropriation, some signage, a desk, computer terminal, something to serve as a informational and operational base for those officers when they need it, when they want it.
Councilmember Neese, we talked briefly, very briefly internally today about this proposal, and I had not committed yet to the council in terms of a timeline to come back and revisit the Tully's property with all of you. I assumed we would do that in Q1 or Q2. So if the council's supportive of earmarking these funds, I think it would certainly be appropriate to do so, knowing that we'll be discussing the Tully's property and the future plan in the early part of next year. We wouldn't commence work on a building project until we came back, to discuss this further with the council. That would be my recommendation. Happy to consider anything else, but you have the $50,000 available right now because the other project was already taken care of.
Yeah, so it's a placeholder, but we'll just keep the funds utilized in the CIP within the biennium.
Craig.
Yeah, I must have missed something. I apologize. The PAO 135, which project is that has the 50,000 coming from?
It's
the redundant parks access control and monitoring project that's already done.
It's putting the automatic locks in the park system, and we were able to do that work this year. So this project proposal is no longer needed. Okay.
Well, I like Councilmember Neese's idea a lot of having that micro precinct there. I just would encourage you as you think about that, to think about if there, I would think that'd be a much larger facility than you would need for that function. And I wonder if there are other city staff that might make sense to relocate in that area, a utilities billing clerk that might interface with the public more or something else, who knows what it might be.
Yeah, we don't know. So it's just a literal placeholder.
Yeah, just keep an open mind as to what it may be when it comes time to planning for it would be my request.
Well, if we're gonna serve coffee, then I'll go there. I can move my office, so.
The machine might still be there, you never know.
Yeah.
Dave.
I was just gonna say something similar to Craig. I think we should just take a holistic look at this and see what would best use by that space.
Jake.
Unmuted. I think we should use that as a placeholder. I think that's would be a very effective way of using something for a future need that we have that we're presently not going to be putting in any use. So good idea.
Yeah, this is Lisa. I'm supportive as well, since I am completely unable to raise my hand on this call.
Sorry about that, Lisa. We'll get your technology fixed up for the next meeting. So I think we have consensus, and this is an easy budget change since we already had the 50,000 set aside. So seeing head nods, we'll make that change for the final budget. City Council, one last call. Any other questions on specific capital improvement program projects? I know you went through the TIP with a fine-tooth comb earlier this year.
Can you just speak to the thrift store budget line item versus the remodel we're talking about, and what contingency there may or may not be if one or the other goes forward?
The thrift shop remodel
Or do you want to save that
project.
till November? Right. So there's some money in here for the thrift store, and then we're talking about the remodel. How do those two
Jason?
mesh?
So the money you see in here is for improvements within that thrift shop facility. Depending on whether we move with option A, which is the open concept, I think it's conceivable that we could scale back the money that's set aside for the thrift shop, because that's it's a revamping of the building, and there's going to be required upgrades. If we go with option B, or I'll say option C or D, where it may be something much smaller, then I think the improvements that you see here recommended need to move forward with the thrift shop building, because we haven't performed the HVAC baseline assessment. If you're doing a much smaller upgrade or no upgrade at all for the thrift shop, that work is still needed to be done. And so I think it's a TBD at this point in time, based off of the, what the future of that thrift shop building is going to be.
Thanks. Okay, anything else? Going once. Going twice. Okay, I think we're done.
So closing comment.
Brings us to other business.
Yeah, well, quick comment. November 2nd, we come back to you. We wrap up all of this information we've discussed over the last 2 meetings and discuss our budget proposals, including the appropriation of the general fund surplus and the one-time funds. Council, what we are working on, and it's almost nearly ready to go, is a calculator, an Excel spreadsheet that will allow you to take all the budget proposals, turn them on and off, and see how they impact the various funds. So we will get that to you possibly by Friday, but most likely by Monday of next week. And I think that will help a lot as we go into November 2nd. As a reminder, 3 more meetings ahead of us, the 2nd, the 17th, and then December 1st for our final budget adoption.
All right, thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Luana, and everybody else who's been working on all these budget documents. Well done. Onward. Okay, so other business in the planning schedule.
Just a reminder, I think I've said this a couple times already, your next meeting is on Monday, November 2nd, not Tuesday, November 3rd. We changed that date. I mentioned in my city manager's report, I've added an item that is not on your planning schedule. I've still got to work out the order of events, but we will have bond counsel joining us for what I'm calling a ballot measure 101 presentation. Probably do that as a study session on the front side of that meeting. Everything else is as presented, headed towards December 1st. Council, we're still, hoping to take that second meeting in December off. This has not been my greatest year for predicting when we can cancel meetings, but we're sticking to that story for now. That's all I have, Deputy Mayor Weicker.
Okay. Are there any upcoming council member absences to report? Craig's hand is up, but I'm presuming that's old.
No.
Is there a motion to excuse Mayor Wong's absence this evening?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Salim moved and Craig seconded. City Clerk, will you please conduct the roll for that vote?
Councilmember Anderl?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacobson?
Aye.
Councilmember Neese?
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds?
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenbaum?
Aye.
And Deputy Mayor Weicker?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to council member reports. Lisa, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, I am the liaison to the Utility Board and the Open Space Conservancy Trust. The Utility Board has met twice, and the first one I had to miss because of family issues, but I watched the tape. The second one I was able to attend, which is great. Tim O'Connell and Tom are still the chair and the deputy chair or vice chair. They never got to serve this year, so it seemed to make sense to reappoint them. And I thought they had very thoughtful presentations about the utility rates that are going to come before the council. So it was a very efficient and well-run meeting. They always are. The Open Space Conservancy Trust, I also had to miss because of family issues, a lot of family issues, but I will watch the tape on that for the next council meeting and report out on how that went.
Great, thank you. Craig.
Yeah, I actually don't have anything to report, but I had a hand still up that I didn't get to ask before. It's a question to the city manager. The calculator spreadsheet, do you envision making that available to the public if there are people who want to play with it themselves?
Yep.
Okay, that would be great. All in favor of that.
All right, Dave.
Nothing to report.
Jake.
The Parks and Rec Commission is going to have its, I think, first meeting of the year, close to it, on November the 5th. It'll be virtual. And so obviously based on tonight's work, there are lots of things that the Parks and Rec Commission will have to chew on at that point. Also, there's an ETP or combined ETP, East Side Transportation Partnership, plus everybody else in the world that's in transportation tomorrow. I'll report on that next week. Or
I don't have anything.
Nothing. And I'm good too. So I want to remind you guys in the public that the next city council meeting will be a joint special meeting with the Mercer Island School District on Thursday, the 22nd. And then due to the election, the city council will meet on Monday, November 2nd at 5 p.m. Okay, so there being no other business to come before the council, the time is now 10:02 and the meeting is adjourned. So as a reminder to the council, please stay seated until the staff has terminated the broadcast. Have a good evening, stay safe, and turn in those ballots.